Hey Sifters, welcome to the very first episode of GameFace Freestyle. Our boy Sam is out on vacation and he operates a Tricaster for us. So we're doing things a little bit differently this week, though I think in some ways it'll be good. We're going to get through a lot more topics than we usually do. Usually we do 6 topics. This week I think we have like 24.
Yeah.
So we're going to kind of machine gun through a lot of topics on this week's show. Maybe also cut a little better since it's not being cut together on the fly. We have an editor who's handling this episode.
Yeah, Sam. Jeez.
So I'm pretty excited. Give us your feedback on this. Let us know what you think. We'll probably do this again next week because I think Sam
is gone again?
He's
Yeah.
gone again next week. So
All having a life. What the hell?
So at the very least, we're going to do 2 of these. Maybe it's something we'll come back to later on down the road if you guys really like the new format. But yeah, so this is GameFace Freestyle. So Matt, Gamescom has been going on all week.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, yeah, it has been all week. The crazy thing about Gamescom this year is that, like, the show actually started today.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, like, over already.
Yeah, we know everything.
Everything's done.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I had anticipated, like, everything
If you're there, I'm sure it's cool. You get to play stuff and do stuff.
Yeah.
But
Like, the show floor is open
for
now.
us.
Everyone can go play. But as far as news, like, it's all done already. So, you know, I had anticipated today being, like, the big kickoff and everything. And, like, it just turned out, like, I was up late on, I think it was, like, Tuesday night at midnight. And I was taking care of a couple things on the site. And all of a sudden, just boom. Like, the admin just lit up with content because there was, like, press conferences going on. And Gamescom sucks if you're here because everything starts at midnight Pacific or 3 a.m. East Coast time. So I've been staying up really late the last few days. What's your overall impressions of Gamescom so far?
It's almost a non-event to me. Like,
It
there's
really
very
is.
little. Like, the most excited I've been this week was today when Ubisoft announced that Star Trek Bridge Crew VR was actually coming out this year.
Yeah, Ubisoft announced all their VR. Well, there are 3 or 4 VR games.
The Eagle thing, and what's the other one?
Oh, they have like the crazy werewolf, like
The werewolf
who
thing.
done
Yeah.
it.
So
And Bridge Commander, obviously.
yeah, and the
Bridge Crew.
Yeah, the Bridge Commander is the other one.
Yeah.
Old one. But the and then it's interesting that the Eagle Flight one is has sort of a timed Oculus exclusive thing going on. So it comes out in October on Oculus, but then it comes out on Vive on December 20th.
Yeah,
Like, oh, Merry Christmas.
Yeah, just in time. Well, I mean,
Barely.
it's probably going to be like downloadable anyway.
Oh yeah.
So that probably should help that a little bit as far as when it comes out.
I mean, I played that at E3. It was fine. I don't really feel the need to own it.
Yeah.
So Bridge Crew is pretty
I know
much
you're getting that one.
my target. And the Werewolf, I mean, I enjoy the Werewolf card game in person, so I mean, that sounds like a cool way to play it, so I'll probably look into that.
So
that's my only big, like, oh, cool, like, news so far.
Yeah, well, last year, you know, Sony dropped out with a press conference, didn't have a press conference last year. This year, no Microsoft or Sony. EA had, like, a fan event, which ended up being this weird kind of thing where people showed up and just kind of milled around, but there wasn't, like, a really attentive crowd, but there was this big stage show going on stage.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, then Peter Moore had a very weird thing to say.
Yeah, so today, Peter Moore, in an interview, I believe with Eurogamer, I
don't remember who it was.
I can't remember who sourced it. I believe it was Eurogamer. But
I was too busy going, what?
Yeah, so today Peter Moore basically said that he thinks the day of the press conference is over.
I mean, if I was putting on EA's press conferences, I might think that too.
Because EA has failed so miserably.
Keeping it 100, I mean, come on.
Yeah, I mean, EA's track record with its press conferences are generally the most boring and dull of all the E3 press conferences.
I mean, if all the press conferences were more like Sony's, or at least like weird and disturbing like Ubisoft's.
Or like Konami's classic press conference.
I mean, EA doesn't even have anything that I can point to and say I hated that. It was just an hour and a half of time that I guess I don't even remember how long it was. At least Ubisoft like made Pachter hate it.
Right.
You know, like you got a reaction. We remember it.
There was some kind of response from it, other than like nothing.
Yeah, like the most memorable thing about EA is they didn't show Mass Effect Andromeda to the point we wanted to see it.
Yeah.
So, like, I guess I can see why the EA would think that that's a diminishing return.
Yeah.
But in terms of, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to how powerful E3 is in terms of determining the future of the future kind of thing.
Oh yeah, it
but
honestly doesn't determine hardly anything.
But in terms of like targeting, like this is where we get like all our new stuff. Mainly Sony and Microsoft, I guess. But this is where I get all our new stuff like targeted at the mainstream press, at the BBC, at every major outlet that normally doesn't put video games on the front page or the top of the hour. Like that's still your opportunity, and in putting it all in one little convenient hour package is still probably worth it, I would think.
Well, what Peter Moore said basically was that they're going to err on the side of more fan-oriented events, like what they did at E3 when they didn't have the booth and they had their own little event a block or two away from the convention center. He said that that's what they're going to lean towards doing, and he believes the rest of the industry is going to follow suit. I personally think it's a terrible idea. You need the spectacle. I mean, the other thing, too, like I noticed about EA's thing at Gamescom was that no one cared. We had curated the live stream, and it was also confusing because they had, like, one master live stream, but then they had separate streams for each game. So in the master stream, they went through all the games, but then, like, a stream would pop up just for Titanfall 2 that only lasted during the Titanfall 2 section of the press conference, and it became really splintered and kind of confusing. Like, some people, like, then the timing was weird. It's like, when you do that stuff, you got to make sure that you're hitting your times exactly, because if you tell people to show up at noon for a Titanfall 2 thing, and you're talking about Battlefield 1 before Titanfall 2 and it runs over a little bit, then all of a sudden, all the people sitting there waiting on that stream for Titanfall 2 are like, what the hell's going on? So I feel like it muddies the message that you're trying to send. I think it makes it difficult for people like us and people who play games to tune in and know when to tune in. We literally had like 4 or 5 live streams pinned to the top of everyone's SIFs for like 3 hours, and then like they would end, and like it was just.
I can see why you wouldn't think that was, depending on how much those things cost, it would be worth it at that event, especially if they have nothing new and amazing to really show. You're mostly recycling the content you showed at your fan event at E3, except for the Titanfall 2 stuff, which is new. So why not? I mean, to some degree, but like, it's always going to be beneficial, even if they switch to a Nintendo Direct style of thing, to like kind of have a pre-produced sort of, even if it's that, but it's just like a way to like be like, here's all the stuff.
Yeah.
Here's a taste of everything we're doing, all the new things, all the stuff that we've seen before, but now we're showing new elements or new footage or new gameplay. And then from there, you can kind of decide what live stream stuff you want to, really zero in on. But having it just be that live stream stuff seems like too scattered to me.
Yeah, it feels like to me Gamescom this year is a non-event.
Yeah.
It's just
Well, it seems like the companies knew that going in too.
One thing I would say, to be fair, is that EA actually did show new stuff. It was all from games that we know and have been announced for a long time. But they did show, like, tons of Titanfall 2 multiplayer. They announced the beta that's launching tomorrow for everybody. Everyone will be able to jump on and play Titanfall 2 over the weekend multiplayer. They showed tons of Battlefield stuff that they hadn't shown before. But them and everybody else, it was all games that we knew about. And it's hard to get excited for that. If you're just someone on Sifted, there's tons of new trailers, but they're trailers for games that there's already 5 or 6 trailers for. Or in the case of a game like Mafia 3, there's already like 20 or 30 trailers for it. So hard to get excited. I don't blame you, Sifters, for not getting really pumped up over Gamescom. But
it's a weird sort of limbo position the industry's in right now in general. Just like everybody's waiting for the VR stuff to launch. Everybody's waiting for the 0.5 systems to launch. Everybody, Nintendo's waiting to show anything for the new system. Like, it really feels like I think I've said it before, but it feels like it's this period from like maybe June to December is kind of like it's between breaths.
Yeah.
Like you're really waiting for everything to finally happen.
Yeah, I think the problem for Gamescom, I don't think it's going to ever become irrelevant or they're going to end it. It's not going to happen.
Just by the size and the accessibility to the public, I don't think it can become irrelevant.
That's the key, the access to the public. As long as I keep doing that, I think it's going to keep going on. I think what you might see, though, as time goes on is big outlets sending less people. It's kind of the thing that's happened with Tokyo Game Show over the last 10 to 15 years. It's like, when we got into the industry, it was huge, and we go, and it was packed to the gills. But over time, less and less press started going, less and less PR people from the U.S. were going. So it became a non-event. And I think if Gamescom keeps walking down this path, we may see a place where IGN isn't doing like 3 or 4 days of live broadcasting from there every day like they're doing right now. And you're not going to see some of the smaller outlets that aren't as big as IGN sending 5 and 6 guys out to Gamescom anymore. I know sitting here and just using Sifted, I really feel no need to have gone there. It doesn't feel like there's a whole lot there that we can't experience. And I think another element is that, everyone's getting to play these games now. So before, the big draw was like, well, I can go there and I can play and experience these games that I won't be able to experience anywhere else. But it's like Titanfall 2. We're all going to play it tomorrow before Gamescom's even over. Battlefield 1 has a beta coming up. Call of Duty does betas. It's like, I don't know. It's really interesting to see the shift. Back to what Peter Moore was saying, I really don't think that press conferences are going away.
Not the E3 ones.
I agree with you that it could be a case where they start doing pre-produced ones and just kind of stream that pre-produced thing that they do. But not even at E3, I don't think. I mean, E3, it's about the spectacle. That's how you get the major outlets there, the Yahoos and the USA Todays and CNN.
And there was a lot of talk, about, well, you're going to fly in all these people and do all this. It's like, yeah, but so much business gets done at E3.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I still feel like most companies...
That most people don't know about.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Because all these
it's a business conference above all else. And, like, I still feel like major companies manage to kill so many birds with that one E3 stone that the expense is going to remain worth it for at least the foreseeable future until things become very different, which they might. I mean, we've seen things become very different at least 3 times in our own careers.
Yeah.
But that next leap hasn't happened yet.
Yep.
I think it's a premature statement.
So let's talk about some of the stuff that was shown at Gamescom. We're not going to make you guys wait all the way to the end of the show to hear us talk about Metal Gear Survive. First Metal Gear game without Kojima at the helm. It is not a full-price game. They said it's going to be sold at a discount, like half price. It's a 4-player cooperative stealth action game.
Action survival game.
Something along those lines.
In which the characters who were not killed at the end of Metal Gear Solid 5 get sucked through a dimensional vortex and end up in a world where they have to fight crystalline zombies. And my first reaction to that was, I don't know if that's too weird or not as weird as usual for this series. It's definitely a different weird.
Yeah.
And my initial reaction is like, nah. People post that Matrix gif all the time of not like this.
Right.
It's like, I'm like, that's kind of where I am with that. And my other question is like, who's making it?
Yeah. I mean, there is no developer that's been announced yet. And, we added the game on Sifted. I was like, I guess we'll just leave this field blank or just put Konami in there.
Metal Gear Survive.
Yeah, I mean...
Good luck.
My initial reaction was the same as yours. I'm like, oh, what the hell? Like, this is supposed to be a Metal Gear game. And look, it's pretty obvious that they just have this project that they're going to slap the name on so people actually have maybe a little bit of interest in it when otherwise maybe they wouldn't. But I'm also, I've said before on the show, I'm not of the camp of people who looks at games, and I've said this with like Metroid Prime Federation Force. Like, I don't immediately just dislike a game because they've put an IP's name on it and it has nothing to do with the IP. And this is obviously a perfect case of that. I'm willing to give it a fair shake, and it's kind of stupid and it's pretty much an obvious cash grab what Konami's doing with the game. But if the game's good, I'm not going to hate on it just because it has the Metal Gear name on it.
I'm just more interested in who's making it.
Yeah.
That's like, I'm like, where is this coming from? Like,
well, remember a while back, Konami announced that it was shopping around for developers to work on Metal Gear. We never heard anything about that afterwards, but...
Makes you wonder what they're doing to Castlevania back there.
Nothing. I mean, I'm honestly shocked. First of all, this game comes out within a year, which is crazy. I guess if it's
someone was already working on it somewhere.
For a while. And maybe they were even working on it. Maybe this is what happened with the whole Kojima thing. Maybe Konami had some studio working on this before Kojima left, and he's like, whoa, you can't do that.
Or maybe he was working on it. And like maybe it's
I think that's highly unlikely, though.
It could be recycled cut content, like with some tweaks to it. Like clearly there was a lot left on the cutting room floor for Metal Gear Solid 5. Maybe they're just taking, this is an idea they were going to do. Let's just sort of polish it up a little bit and call it its own game. And there you go. We'll just have it be zombies instead. Because when you think about it, it's not that different from like the possessed soldiers in 5. So maybe it's basically just a reskin of some multiplayer concept.
My fear is that it turns out just like Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you noticed or not, but what Capcom did was when they first announced the game, it was called Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles. And then as...
Umbrella Core?
Oh, Umbrella Core, sorry. And as time
Umbrella Chronicles is the light gun game,
right.
which was pretty good.
Which wasn't bad, yeah. But as time went on and they saw the fan feedback, you know, what I was saying earlier about the fans complaining that, hey, you tacked this name onto it or whatever, eventually that Resident Evil moniker went away. Mm-hmm. So by the time the game was reviewed, it was just called Umbrella Core, and it wasn't called Resident Evil at all.
And it won't show up in your Resident Evil Metacritic searches.
Right, exactly. And so I'm wondering if that might be the same tack that Konami is taking with this, that it may eventually drop the Metal Gear moniker, but at the same time...
Survive.
Is there a game called Survive yet?
There must be.
You would think,
yeah,
but I can't remember one.
I'm sure it's early access on Steam somewhere since 2012.
Yeah, but I was just shocked in the first place that Konami, 1, is actually going ahead with the Metal Gear game, 2, what the game was, and 3, that it's coming out so soon.
Yeah.
I mean, I figured they would show this maybe at Tokyo Game Show, and then it would be a year and a half afterwards, but...
I hope you play Pachinko on the load screens.
That would be what it takes to get Japanese players to buy another Metal Gear game, man. Sales there are really bad right now. So, right now, for me, I'm kind of ambivalent to the whole thing. Like...
Yeah, I mean, I'm perfectly willing to just consider the Metal Gear Solid series over.
Yeah.
Whatever they put out, you know, I don't.
Even if they do put out like a proper Metal Gear Solid game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a giant fan of the Metal Gear games to begin with. So, you know, who knows? Maybe they might put out one that I find more palatable than Kojima's weird shit.
Or what if they got Naughty Dog to work on a Metal Gear, made it exclusive to PlayStation platforms or whatever?
Okay, well, what if they cloned a dinosaur? As long as we're talking about, yeah.
But I think that's what it's going to take, honestly, to one for me personally to have any interest in another Metal Gear game is for them to find a developer with a pedigree.
Yeah.
If they're just like, hey, we whipped up this new studio to make this game, like. That's, to me, is really bad.
Well, I mean, you can just go to Platinum. They'll make anything for the right amount of money, apparently.
Yeah, you're right. But
they did do a pretty good Metal Gear game. Very different Metal Gear game, but I liked Revengeance.
Chances are we're probably going to like Revengeance more than Survive.
Yeah, I would be surprised if that wasn't the case, but, you know, every once in a while they pull out a pretty good thing, and a lot of times even the mediocre Platinum games have a lot more depth than you think they do.
Oh, for sure.
There's a guy going, God, I can't remember his name now, on YouTube, but he's putting up these really in-depth videos of Transformers Devastation. Like each video details a very specific element. He's like gone through and got hit stagger data for every imaginable situation, for every enemy type, and I mean that game didn't really set my world on fire at all, even though I liked the art style and the homages and stuff. But I'm looking at that game is like. It's like the Marianas Trench of character action fighting licensed robot games.
I feel sad when I think about that guy, though. It's like, why would you dedicate so much time to something like that?
He's a platinum. I can't remember his YouTube name, but he does
platinum fan
he's a huge platinum fan, and he's just doing. And I'm like, oh, that's why that. Because there's little things he has in these videos that explain these quirks that I couldn't figure out when I played the game. I'm like, oh, that's why that's like that. Yeah. And it actually made me want to go back and play it again because I'm like, oh, now that I know this, I bet I could do a lot better at some of these things. And so, yeah, even on their kind of what could have been a throwaway license game, Platinum does put a lot of thought into these things. So I guess if you're really down to the wire on hiring a mercenary crew to, make a new Metal Gear game, I guess Platinum would be sort of the direction to take. And they have experience with it.
Yeah, I mean,
they've
they've
worked directly with
making
Kojima
bigger
before.
games as well.
Yeah.
Not just little, because Transformers was a pretty small game. But.
Yeah, but they've made Revengeance and they've made stuff for Nintendo and they've made the Bayonettas and I mean, there's pedigree and they've made the Okami is that's basically the people who made Okami.
Yeah.
Still,
it's a robust game. Yeah. So they certainly have the chops to be able to pull it off.
So maybe, but I feel like that would be a little more effort and money than Konami's probably willing to put towards this. They just want the money that the name can make them. So I'm sure we'll keep an eye on it.
We'll do this in the last time we'll be talking about this game on GameFace.
I can't wait for the first screens.
Well, there are screenshots out there.
Oh, there are?
Yeah, they put out 3 of them last night. Mm. Yeah, none of them look that great, though.
No.
And none of them you would ever guess they're a Metal Gear game by looking at the screenshots.
Not even they don't even show the characters?
No,
no
they're always
Ocelot
behind the headshots or whatever, so yeah. we'll see. I'm sure we'll get a lot more. Maybe at Tokyo Game Show, as I mentioned before, which is just a month away.
Yeah.
So maybe they'll have a playable on the show for you, and you never know.
Well, they do seem to be further ahead than we would have thought.
Yep. So let's move on from a game that we didn't like to a game that got me really excited with this Gamescom showing, and that game is Yooka-Laylee. Oh my gosh, that trailer came out at like 2:30 in the morning, and I yelled so loud watching it that I woke my wife up. So we've seen this game for a while. Obviously, it's by Playtonic, a bunch of guys who used to work with Rare. They're reviving the 3D platformer franchise. All the stuff we've seen in this game so far has been like dev stuff. We'd see the characters running around in this generic jungle world.
Right.
More recently, we got to look at the toy box, which is just this little side mode or whatever. Gamescom is the first time they've shown the game in earnest. They put out a trailer that looked like it could have been a trailer for Banjo-Kazooie back in the 90s or whatever. It showed a wide swatch of gameplay, and to me, it looks absolutely incredible. I was over the moon watching this. Ratchet & Clank, they actually mentioned in an interview today that the sales of Ratchet & Clank and the reception of the Ratchet & Clank remaster have emboldened them and made them feel positive that the game has a chance to do really well. For me, watching the trailer for this game from Gamescom, I'm beyond sold on this game at this point. It was also curious to see how much of it is done. It looks like there's a level that people were allowed to play at Gamescom, and it looks like the level is finished and it's ready to play. I watched a couple different playthroughs of it. One time, one person went one way, and another time another person went another way, and they ended up doing entirely different things in the same level. So it's got that BT kind of level design and vibe to it. I am really stoked. There's a minecart level, very much like Donkey Kong Country, a nod to some of their prior games. As far as I'm concerned, if there's one game that after its Gamescom showing went up the most for my excitement and hype, it was definitely Yooka-Laylee. Did you get a chance to check it out at all?
I didn't, but it's pretty much on my 100% going to play list already. I mean, just those guys. I love Banjo-Kazooie. I thought Banjo-Tooie was a little much.
Oh yeah, it was hardcore, dude.
And I didn't like Donkey Kong Country or Donkey Kong 64 because A, I don't particularly like Donkey Kong, and B, the fade in on the objects killed me because you couldn't just look up and see the banana.
You're right.
You had to actually go up there and see if there was a banana there, and sometimes you were wasting your time, and I hated that.
That's where they had pushed it too far.
And splitting Banjo-Kazooie up into 5 different characters with the same moves, essentially.
Yeah.
It was. I thought it was annoying. And
they required the RAM expansion for that, right? Yeah.
And it still didn't help the drawing.
Yeah.
Imagine that. Think 20 years ago, you had to worry about. They had to worry about I don't know if the system's powerful enough to draw the banana across the level so you can see it. It's crazy now.
I did play Donkey Kong 64 all the way to the end, and I finished the whole game at 99.9%. There was one objective I never managed to complete. I just could never do it. I tried it hundreds and hundreds of times and never figured it out and managed to do it.
My main issue with Banjo-Tooie, I think I stalled out on Tooie on that the mountain that was half cold, half hot.
Yeah.
I don't remember what that was called. But there was a point at which I'm just I don't even know where I am anymore. I don't know. And my main problem with that game actually was that you would constantly run into situations where I wasn't sure if I needed a move, because there was constantly that thing where there were things where you couldn't do it because you had to get a move in a later level and come back to get it.
Yeah.
And I was never quite sure if this required a move I didn't have or if I was just doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And I just got tired of that ambiguity.
Getting an item and figuring out, the world was so big, figuring out how to get back to where you needed to go. This is before there were warp pads everywhere and I think there actually were warp pads in
there were warp pads in there, yeah.
But it was so confusing. The world, it was just spaghetti and it was back now there's waypoints that show you how to go where you need to go.
Maps.
You get something and instantly there's a little waypoint showing you how to exactly go back and use it.
Or the main thing,
not back then.
You forget about the N64 where you couldn't just turn and and I've had this happen a couple times in No Man's Sky or The Witcher or whatever. You're okay, you turn and then you can see where you need to go.
Yeah.
And on the N64, it's no, it's just sort of a flat plane of maybe you can see sort of the hill of the geography, but you can't see buildings haven't drawn in. There's nothing there. Yeah. And even though the Banjo-Tooie was probably one of the better draw distance games on that system.
Also ran at like 18 frames a second.
Oh god, like, the people freaking out about 60 frames per second are death these days. I'm just like, man, like the idea of a steady frame rate was ridiculous back. I'm thinking about like playing
Digital Foundry did
Turok 2 on the N64 with the RAM expansion pack, and it's just like, nah, it's like what? You get like 12, 13 frames a second out of that. You're like, oh, this is great. Like, this is
Digital
perfect.
Foundry just went back and did a retro thing on GoldenEye 007 for the N64. I don't know if you watched it or not. But it bottoms out at times at like 10 or 11 frames a second on some of those levels. So.
And Perfect Dark was worse.
It was worse, yeah. Even if you didn't have the RAM expansion, you couldn't really even play the game with Perfect Dark. So.
And then with Perfect, and like I remember, because we played GoldenEye a ton on multiplayer.
Everybody did, yeah.
And then Perfect Dark came along, and like we were having trouble because like people, guys who were like perfect on GoldenEye could like one shot you from across the map on the whatever. Like the frame rate would vary so much in multiplayer that like they would miss they'd scroll basically they'd aim past the target because they like they know like now that I'm rotating towards this I have to stop rotating, but the game's frame rate like would skip and they'd like miss their reticle would go past what they were trying to shoot at and they couldn't. I remember one of our regular players was like, I can't be good at this. Like it was like he just like it was so choppy. He was determined. He's like, I can't be good at it. And then he decided that it was better with the frame rate. The frame rate was better when you turned all the bells and whistles off and didn't use the expansion pack features. But then there were other people in the group that were like, no, it looks ugly now, and I want to play it looking pretty. And like no one could agree on that. And I guess that's really the same argument that's happening now.
It is
between the 60 and 30 people.
No, you're right. So I think Rare has heard all this.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm pretty confident.
They probably knew it before they shipped it.
Right.
I mean, that's just the tech they were working with.
And I'm pretty confident that they've listened to all this feedback. And again, these guys aren't Rare anymore, but they worked there for decades or whatever. I'm pretty confident that Playtonic has listened to all this stuff and are going to give us a game that's probably around BK, but then address a lot of the sort of modernization of video games that's happened over the last 10 years, because it's been a while since they've made a game like this. So I'm excited for Yooka-Laylee. I don't know about y'all.
Been a long time since we've seen a rock with googly eyes on it.
Yeah, or any inanimate object with eyes on it. All right, so let's move on. Let's talk about one of the bigger reveals for Injustice so far. They showed off Harley Quinn and Deadshot for the first time. Not surprising at all. Harley Quinn obviously is in Suicide Squad right now. The timing was perfect, obviously, for them to show her off for the first time. Did you get to watch that at all?
A little bit.
Because
I'm not keeping up with that game too much.
I'm surprised to hear that.
I don't really care.
Why is that?
Well, because I feel like the DC just doesn't particularly do it for me these days. Like not modern stuff, and like that original teaser was like it was well produced, but I'm just like, it's really dark and everyone's wearing Tron armor, and I don't get what you're doing. Like the mechanics aren't very interesting, and I'm kind of over the modern NetherRealm formula.
Yeah, because it is a template that they've been snapping things into for 6 or 7, maybe more than that.
And I will probably play it. Years. Like when the time comes, I will probably play it just because it's a fighting game and that's what I do. But I'm just sort of like, it's like, oh, okay, Harley Quinn and Deadshot are in it, great. Like it's like whatever. Like and of course Harley Quinn, I don't care too much. I love Harley Quinn in the animated series. Don't care too much for the like crazy over the top sex pot portrayal of her that like dominates the modern version of the character that kind of started in the Arkham games.
Yeah.
Although she's a great character in the Injustice comics series, which is they did a comic series based on Injustice that kind of covers the story between Superman killing the Joker and Superman being the ruler of the world that is the plot of the game, and it's great. Like it's really good. Like they found a way to make this like ridiculous fighting game like premise like work from a character perspective, and you see
which they've never really done in a fighting game yet.
No, but like it's if you can find the Injustice comic, like it's really good.
I think I got issue 1 whenever the first one came out. They sent it out with the game.
Yeah, like I've read the first 2 or 3 years. I think I lost track of it around there, but like they really like figure out a way to make these characters go from point A to point B that I'm just like, wow, I wouldn't have thought. And like they're kind of like they're kind of allowed to take the gloves off because it's not in the main continuity. So they do some pretty daring stuff here and there, and it's solid. So if they can kind of incorporate that into the game, that'd be cool. I mean, we haven't seen a ton about the story mode, but yeah,
everyone's gushing over.
Here's
Harley
your Suicide
Quinn.
Squad characters.
Yeah.
You know?
Everyone's gushing over Harley Quinn, but based on that trailer, like I thought Deadshot looked like the more interesting character to play as in the game. Because he uses his guns and his weapons. And
I think, in general, fighting game people don't quite trust gun characters at this, especially like because early on they tend to be really good, and then they tend to, or if people figure out, oh, it's actually really simple to get around this, we just know. So like that happened with Deathstroke in Injustice 1. It happened with Deadpool early on in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and Dante to some degree.
Yeah.
It was like. So I think there's sort of this, well, we'll believe that when we see it. But whereas Harley is a more traditional melee kind of thing, and she's got a lot of weird tricks to her, and she's, the animation's really good. She's, her personality comes through in her attacks. Like it's, whether you like the modern version of that character or not, they nail the character in how she's portrayed and how she fights. So like that's, I think, what people are looking for the most in this game. And NetherRealm's doing a good job. The character models look much, much better. Wonder Woman in the first Injustice was famous for being one of the most horrendously ugly character models for a woman ever in fighting games, and now they look very, very, very much better. And I wouldn't say great yet, but they're improving. So I'm interested to see some of the more obscure characters as they come along. I mean, we've seen quick flashes of Black Manta.
I mean, Deadshot's pretty obscure.
Not anymore. He's in Suicide Squad.
Right,
he's
right.
the star. Anyone Will Smith plays is no longer obscure. That's one of my Hollywood rules. He was pretty obscure until now. If you hadn't played Arkham City, basically, I always used to confuse him with Deathstroke. Him and Deathstroke were always the two I'd mix up.
Very similar names as well.
Yeah, and. So I'm looking. We've seen like Black Manta and some of the what people thought were a stage transition. I was like, oh, I don't know if he's playable or whatever. It was like now it turns out Black Manta is the villain in the Aquaman movie coming up, and so maybe Black Manta is in this game. And the idea that Black Manta would be a playable character,
he'll be in the game.
Yeah, the idea that Black Manta would be a playable character in a game is crazy.
That's DC though. I mean, it doesn't have the roster of heroes that Marvel has. So
no, but it's just
like do the best it can with what
it's like. You've got the Trinity. And then you've got the rest of the Justice League, and then you've got thousands of things no one's ever heard of, and that's pretty much how it goes. But I always liked Black Manta just because he was the Aquaman bad guy in Super Friends, and he had like the cool kind of like helmet voice. I'm like, oh, cool. That's all I needed when I was 7.
So we talked about a game that I felt where my hype went way up. Based upon its Gamescom showing. Now we're going to talk about a game that, for me personally, I felt like after seeing what was shown at Gamescom, I'm nowhere near as excited for.
I think I know what this one is.
This game is Resident Evil 7. Have you watched that new gameplay clip that they just posted?
Yeah, that's. I had a bunch of people text me and say like, "What happened? Like, what's going on? Like with that?" And like it looks almost like a PS2 game.
Oh, it looks so bad.
It's
and look, I've already seen.
And I know it's got to be VR, PSVR capable, and you can't blow the Uncharted 4 doors off when you do that. But wow.
Oh, I've already seen apologists online saying, "Oh, that's like their VHS filter that they're throwing over top of it, and found footage style. And if you actually, when they take that off, the game's going to look great." I'm not so certain about that, people. Like,
I don't know about that.
I don't either. Like that. I mean. I think the problem is that they built it from the beginning for VR. And I don't even know that they did build it from the beginning for VR. I think what happened was they built that quick and dirty kitchen demo, and the response to it was so amazing. They're like, okay, well, this is our next Resident Evil. Instead of saying, okay, that's a proof of concept, and then going back and starting from scratch to build Resident Evil 7, it looks like they just used that engine they used for kitchen, and we're like, this is good enough. And look, it may be a technical thing, where they're like, look, we have to develop for the lowest common denominator, which is PlayStation VR. And it is kind of PlayStation VR's flagship game. So maybe that's sort of the reasoning behind the whole thing. But most people, one, are not going to play this game in VR. Most people are going to play this game traditionally the way they've always played a Resident Evil game. And the game looks dreadful. I mean dreadful. I mean, it's above PS2. But it's like early Xbox 360.
Yeah.
I mean, Actually, obviously, it runs.
Like
I hope at a higher resolution.
It actually did remind me a little bit of Condemned.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. What do you think of the game? Obviously, the graphics engine, neither one of us are fans of. What do you think about the actual gameplay of what they showed there?
I mean, it's not like too far off of like other sort of like explore the area, almost walking simulator stuff I've seen for like the Vive in VR, and some of that's pretty fun. So like, but like you say, it really is starting to feel like if you don't play this game in VR, you are going to be missing like 80% of the experience. Like, I don't know if this is going to be worth it to just play on your TV, because it really seems to be banking on the idea that you are immersed and present in this place.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is going to, I mean, it varies from player to player, but I don't know if this game's going to pull that off just watching on screen. Because watching the trailer, I'm just like, okay, I get they're trying to reinvent it as more of a puzzly sort of slower paced game without as much like crazy shotgun combat and all that.
Yeah.
Because
it's all about tension, it appears.
Right.
Because the demo that they show and you're seeing it right now.
But they've never been good at that.
Yeah.
It's
like hide and seek what they showed.
Like Silent Hill used to be the tension game.
Yeah.
And Resident Evil was like, oh, we got to blow stuff's heads off.
Yeah.
Even in the old games, it was
Resident Evil went more for like gore.
Right. It was gross. It was a gross out game, or like it was a jump scare kind of thing, or the shark popping out of the water and that kind of thing. And I get they're trying to do more of a Silent Hill kind of thing with this. It looks like to me, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It's not obviously not the same people that made the old Resident Evil games, but like that's a harder thing to do, I think, and it's going to live or die on execution. And so far, the execution does not impress me.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I was on edge watching that demo, and I had put headphones on because I feel like with games like that, audio is a big part of it. And, it wasn't like all cut up like a trailer. It was just like, here's this section of the game, we're going to play it. And I kind of appreciate that. I feel like that's the right way to market a game like that instead of trying to make it all look... And I'm wondering if there's anything fancy to see in this game at this point. I mean, all we've seen so far is like a cabin and running from that cabin to other cabins. I feel like the tension looks like it's okay, but I don't know. It certainly doesn't look like or appear to play like a Resident Evil game.
No, it
but
looks
that's
more like
what
an
people have
Outlast
been
kind of
asking
thing.
for a long time. After Resident Evil 6, everyone's like, all right, it's time to rip up the script and start over, and Capcom did do that, so that's kind of listening to fans. I don't know if it's the right direction.
Yeah, I don't know if this is what people were expecting or wanting, but...
Which can be okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's better than another, rocky, weird, like, action romp through the increasingly convoluted story nobody cares about.
Right, where it headed in 5 and ultimately was 6.
6, for sure. I mean, man.
5 had its moments where it was kind of like the old Resident Evil, or at least like Resident Evil 4.
Here and there. 6 was a different series.
It was just an action game, pretty much.
Yeah. It was an action game with a giraffe getting a blowjob on the cover. I don't know who let that 6 through, but that's what I see every time I see that logo.
Well, the other thing, too, is that this game comes out in like 5 or 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean...
Like you can't get away from the whole, like, oh, maybe it's just not polished. Yeah, it's like, nah, this thing's coming up.
Maybe dispels my theory that, they built off of Kitchen, because if that's the case, I don't feel like they would have had enough time to get this game done. Yeah, so...
My other question is, how long is this thing?
I mean, yeah.
Like, I'm kind of thinking this is like a 3-4 hour game.
It's a VR game. It makes me nervous. Anytime something is a VR game, I get nervous because if something has a VR element to it, because most of the VR experiences are experiences and not real games at this point. So I hope this isn't like some goofy like 3 or 4 hour thing that like they found some way to encourage you to try to play it over and over again. Like, I'd be really disappointed if that were the case.
But I'm wondering, is there more to it? Because I know Sony does have this thing going where, like, some of their games are, like, intentionally making you take the headset off.
Right.
Because they don't want you to play it forever in the headset. Like, that Gollum game is, like, you only put the headset on when you're controlling the Gollum for shorter periods of time.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's like other things in this game.
That's really annoying, by the way.
Yeah.
Who wants to keep taking it off and putting it back on and taking it off?
Yeah, well, especially because like it doesn't include the headphones are a separate. That's true on the Vive as well. But like getting the PlayStation VR thing on is a process.
It is.
You got to get the thing on and you get the headphones on and you got to find your
sure
controller
right,
and you got to do And and it's not like crazy, but it's like it's a break in the gameplay that sort of puts you back on the couch real quick, and that's sort of a weird. But also, like, I've been in that thing for hours at a time, and I'm fine. Like, you don't need to break. I don't need to come out. I mean, that's what I love about the Vive is it's like, no, all the menus in here, you never need to take it off.
Yeah,
like,
as long as you have a camera facing out, so you can flip it on and see what's going on around you. Like, there's really no reason to.
Yeah, I don't think
if
I have
it's comfortable
that.
anyway.
Yeah, well, until it gets too hot.
Yeah. So let's move on. Let's talk about South Park: The Fractured Butthole. It's very important how you accentuate the syllables in the title of this game. Its big coming out party was Gamescom. This is one game that really we got to see way, way more of it than we had ever seen before. They also announced right before the show this crazy, like, apparatus that you strap onto your face that makes you smell farts. Like, they put out a trailer for it, and I would check the date. I'm like, it's not April 1st. I'm like, that's weird, but it still seemed completely fake to me. Like, I thought it was just a joke. It's a South Park game. I'm like, it's just some little spoofy thing that they're doing for it or whatever. No, it's real, dude. Like, at Gamescom, people are playing the game with this gas mask on their face that emits fart smells.
Sure, why not?
I don't think they've said yet whether or not, like, it's going to actually, like,
the only thing left for VR. I'll strap that on, put the headphones on. I mean, your whole face is going to be covered
with something,
like sensory input.
Yeah. Then you have like a haptic feedback suit. You're running on like a treadmill. It's like, just go outside at this point and have somebody fart in your face.
Easily available on the streets of Los Angeles
or San Francisco. But let's talk about the game, because they've shown now tons of gameplay, not like trailers. They did have a trailer, which is great, but not just cut together like montages or whatever, chunks of gameplay. They've shown the first 20, 30 minutes of the game. They've shown, selecting your class and things like that. What do you think of it so far?
I mean, I like it, and I like the first one, and my favorite thing about this is, now one of the big things is your characters can move on the battlefield. Like, there's positional combat like strategies and stuff used. And I'm like, you're using the South Park brand to trick people into playing a strategy RPG.
Yeah.
That's really funny to me.
Yeah.
Like, this is a genre that, like, you couldn't sell for free for
it is
years
like the
and
core
years
of the
and
core
years.
games.
Yeah, and here you are. So, like, as long as you put farts and South Park in it,
Sold.
and do some kind of ass joke in the title,
you're good to go.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And like the funny thing, I mean, I like that genre a lot. There's a lot of really fun strategy RPGs. I mean, XCOM. I mean, basically, this is XCOM.
It is, yeah.
With
South
farting.
Park. Yeah, with farting. with flatulence.
And
I'm really excited for it, though.
Yeah.
I personally love strategy RPGs. They're some of my favorite games to play. They're certainly a really good time sink, and that would be one of my bigger concerns, I think. And this is one of the things that did bother me about the first one a little bit, is that I'm used to playing these games for like dozens of hours. And kind of having this long, prolonged character development where you really get into the characters, and you really feel it when you lose one of those characters. One of those characters dies. A lot of these games have permadeath in them, which is odd, isn't it? Like, for whatever reason, strategy RPGs, it's the one genre that has permadeath quite often.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is, but...
Comes from Fire Emblem.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of the first series that really did it and made a name doing that. But somehow I doubt that that's going to be a feature in the Fractured Butthole.
Probably not, but...
I laugh every time I say that. I'm still like a 13-year-old kid at heart, I guess.
I like the first one. Was a great parody of fantasy RPGs, and this one's taken on the superhero stuff.
Right.
And the classes so far look like surprisingly varied, and like there's a lot of them.
Yeah,
like there's a
like
lot
a
of
ton.
options. Like they're covering every imaginable superhero idea you could do, and but they're still sort of grounding it in that that whole, it's like, is it real or is it not? The first one had that too, where it's like when you cast like electric spells, you're really just zapping someone with a battery hooked to a car antenna, and like there's a lot of that on this too, where it's this weird blurred line whether it's really happening or whether the kids are just imagining it. Like, but still, the kids are beating up burglars and stuff. So like it's just a really appealing game to me,
Yeah.
especially because it looks exactly like the TV show because the TV show is so low tech to begin with.
Well, one of the guys who works on the site, Vin Hill, is working on the game, and so from the sounds of it, it sounds like, and he's an artist on the game. It sounds like they're just pulling in show assets and.
Well, and I also love that like the big like fart effects are like way better than the rest of the like they're like super volumetrically modeled smoke and shit. Everything else is just like this flat animation, but the fart and I'm like I have to take that as a reference to like the Final Fantasy VII like summon animations and stuff where it's just like here's this thing that we put way more effort into that you're just going to have to sit through.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. So let's move on. Let's talk about another semi-debut. They showed Watch Dogs 2 multiplayer for the first time. The vibe I was getting off of this is very much Grand Theft Auto Online.
Yeah. Well, whatever works.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's become a cash cow for 2K, so much so that there's no way we're ever going to get any form of story DLC for Grand Theft Auto 5.
No.
Like, 2K's basically like, we're making so much money off people paying for microtransactions in Grand Theft Auto Online.
Why would you?
Why would we bother? Yeah, because you figure people who are still playing Grand Theft Auto Online, I guarantee you spent way more than $20 on microtransactions.
Oh, yeah.
And that's all you're going to get from maybe some customers if you're doing story DLC. So while I hate it, and I don't really play Grand Theft Auto Online. I did for review and played it for 10 or 15 hours. Got sick of getting all my money stolen.
I played it to a ridiculous level. I played it. The only trophy I don't have in that game is level 100.
Wow.
And I stopped at like level 79. I mean,
you're on your way.
We'd done pretty much everything, but I'm just like, well, I could grind all my way to 100 and get the platinum, or I could do literally anything else. And so that's what I just never went back to do. But I did everything in that game, even online, and like having a group to play with is key.
It is, obviously. For sure.
But
I mean, the most fun I had playing Grand Theft Auto Online was just messing around with other people, just setting up crazy stunts like stacking cars and helicopters and doing jumps or jumping and smashing into piles of cars, like just like stunt type stuff, just to see what you could do with it.
Well, we did like we had a constant game of one-upmanship where we'd start out running around doing what we were doing, and then someone would kill someone else.
Yeah.
And then it was like the unspoken rule was you had to then kill them in a more spectacular manner. So someone would like kill someone with a sword, and then the other person would shoot them back, and then they'd come back with a car, and then they'd come back with a truck, and then and eventually got to like someone would disappear for like 20 minutes while they went to the military base and got a jet and came back and just started strafing where the rest of us were, and like so that was sort of the fun of it. And then there was a user-made game type where basically there was like this floating platform in the middle of an intersection, and one team is on the platform with like rocket launchers and shit, and the other team has the fastest cars in the game, and there's these giant ramps, and the idea is the car team is supposed to ramp up and hit the people on the platform and knock them off or kill them.
It's like bowling.
And the people with the rocket launchers are trying to shoot the cars. And we played that for hours.
Yeah.
Like it's just hours and hours and hours.
Watch Dogs 2 looks like it's headed down that path, and you start factoring in all the hacking and the tech stuff that's kind of already a part of the franchise. Like, honestly, at this point, I feel like I'm more excited to play the multiplayer in Watch Dogs 2 than like the campaign.
Maybe. I mean, it looks like something actually happens there.
Yeah.
Maybe less drone surveillance of .com startups and more shooting.
Yeah, and that would be smart, I believe, on Ubisoft's part, is to stray at least a little bit away from what you're doing in the gameplay loop in the campaign for the multiplayer. I think that's where Rockstar really nailed it with Grand Theft Auto Online, is that they didn't worry about trying to make it like playing the campaign. They're like, how can we make this as fun as possible for multiple people to play it? And it seems obvious,
right? And
but we don't get that everything.
Like while the multiplayer idea in the first Watch Dogs was seemed like a cool idea, when you're actually playing the game, it was mostly just annoying.
It was just like Assassin's Creed multiplayer.
Yeah.
It sounds like a great idea until you actually go and play it, and you're like, this is dumb. Like, there's all these weird quirks about it. Like,
I can't find the dude. And it's like when you do find him, it's like, well, wait, is that like the UI doesn't quite match up with what you think you're seeing?
Yeah. And
then the worst part, and then to compound it in Watch Dogs, like it's in the middle of the game.
Right.
Because at least in Assassin's Creed, you have to actually go do it.
You're right.
Whereas in Watch Dogs is like, oh, you were doing a thing, but now there's a guy invading you, and now and it's just like, oh, like now I got to stop and find him. And
I actually didn't see if that's the way this one's going to work. Did you? I sure hope not.
No, I am all for the multiplayer being a discrete, separate mode.
Yeah.
I don't need that. I like the connectivity idea. I like kind of the little competition to be king of locations, like the check-in stuff, and that kind of stuff. That asynchronous multiplayer feature. But I'm okay if people don't invade my game.
Yeah, see, I like cooperative stuff that way.
Yeah.
Like if you're...
I like invading, like in Dark Souls. I think that's fun. But Dark Souls is fun to fight in.
Yeah.
And Watch Dogs, I'm just like, well, I hope this stupid control scheme lets me do what I want to do. Like, that's the thing is like...
I like the idea of calling in people to help you with something.
Yeah.
Like, say you're in a part of a game that's really difficult. Like, I like the idea of going to your friends list and saying, hey, Matt and Adam and whoever else, ding, 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 come and help me. And you guys jump into the game and help me get through it, and maybe you stick around, maybe you don't or whatever. But I like the idea of co-op really being cooperative and having people kind of aid you in getting through the campaign.
You can do that in Dark Souls 3, I'm just saying.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I've been kind of sour on Watch Dogs 2 the whole time, I have to admit. Like, for whatever reason, it's just not really tripped my trigger. It's showing at Gamescom. It's helped with that a little bit, but man, that game's coming out real soon, too.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I'm mostly in for the San Francisco. So...
That's enough for me to play it.
Yeah.
Just being able to go into the most modern representation of San Francisco in a video game to date. That'll be enough. And I hope it is really accurate so that like we can drive past like the old studio at Tech TV and go out the Sega building.
The Zynga building now. I guess they're selling that building, but it is still the Zynga building right now.
Yeah, so...
But
that's a big enough hook for me. I wonder for people who have never lived in San Francisco if it's the same.
Well, I hope it's as pretty as it looks in the trailers on like PS4 because I am not dumb enough to buy a Ubisoft PC port. Yeah. So I guess we'll see.
Well, no matter what, the driving is going to be fun in the game.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows if the controls are going to be great or not, but just with all the hills and everything in that city, like...
It's a great driving city.
Yeah.
Well, from an action standpoint, it's not great to drive in reality, but
because in a lot, and even Grand Theft Auto in a lot of cases, like once you've played an open world game long enough, you're in hour 33 or whatever of some huge, massive game. The driving eventually just becomes like this means to an end. Like it's not really fun anymore, and like I get to this point where I just get annoyed if cars get in my way. It's like it's not that I don't know. I'm hoping that this game, with its terrain and all the hills and everything, that driving will remain exciting throughout the duration of the game instead of just kind of becoming something you have to do. All right, so, both of us have been pretty high on Infinite Warfare, Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, so far after its E3 showing. We mentioned it on the show last week. We mentioned it before. They just showed the Zombies mode at Gamescom for the first time. Did you watch that trailer?
I did not see this.
Oh, you did not? So it's like this 80s, which is really weird because it's like an 80s disco motif. And, as we both know, disco was the 70s. But for whatever reason, it has this kind of disco, neon-drenched flavor to it. And it has, like, David Hasselhoff and, like, Pee Wee Herman in it. It is
weird.
The polar opposite of the Zombies mode in Black Ops 3. I don't know if you've played it at all or if you've even just watched the trailers for all of it. But that, like, Black Ops 3's zombie stuff is pretty serious.
Yeah.
Like, it's not... There's a little bit of tongue-in-cheek here and there, and, like... It's kind of like the dispensers that you use to get weapons and stuff like that. There's a little bit of a comedic twist on those, but otherwise it plays it pretty straight. This one, not so much at all. It's just total camp. It doesn't seem to fit with the rest of the game at all. And look, I get Zombies has always been kind of this separate thing. It started in like a World War II game, for God's sake, with Nazi zombies. So I get that kind of the genesis of it is kind of this quirky, funny, fun thing. But I feel like maybe they're going a little bit too far with this one.
It seems like maybe a better angle on this one might have been like a cheesy pulp sci-fi kind of.
Which is what they've done before,
right? But I mean like Buck Rogers kind of stuff, like space zombies and like
Well, that's kind of what they're calling it. They're calling it like space zombies. They should have called it Astro Zombies after the Misfits song. It makes too much sense.
But I would have more like a ray gun sort of like sort of the space opera, the stuff
like
Star Wars
is
based
sci-fi
on.
type of thing. Yeah,
that would have worked. But I mean, David Hasselhoff is cool too. It'll be a big hit in Germany.
Yeah, you're right. He's a multi-platinum recording artist in Germany for whatever reason. What's wrong with you, Germany? Why do you like David Hasselhoff?
Germans love David Hasselhoff. It's one of the basic rules of the world.
Well, a lot of people in the world...
Very few things in this world you can count on, and that's one of them.
Well, a lot of people our age in other countries feel like they've learned what American culture is like by watching Baywatch, because for whatever reason, that show was syndicated overseas. I know why the reason is.
It was the most watched show in the world for a while, until Stargate SG-1 took over.
Right. And the reason is because there's tons of hot chicks in it.
Right.
And wearing nothing, so...
It's also a documentary. as well you know. I mean, we don't bring those little red floaty things on camera because that's considered rude in this country. But we have right over there.
Yeah. Just in case we need a lifeline. But
I'll be there.
But I feel like this is a little bit of a downturn for this game looking at it. And, like, I get it. Probably 10% of the people who play a Call of Duty game ever even play zombies. Mm-hmm. But like I mentioned before, like, my little brother, that's the only reason he buys Call of Duty is to play the zombies mode. So
is he old enough to know who David Hasselhoff is?
Borderline.
I mean,
I think everybody knows who he is at this point because he's become kind of this like pop culture joke.
At the very least, you know he's the drunk guy on the floor with the burger.
Yeah. You'd think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That was recent.
Yeah, I don't think my brother would know him from Baywatch, I guess is the best way to put it. Like, I doubt he's maybe watched a couple episodes.
Yeah, I know him from Knight Rider.
So that's where I know him from. Yeah, exactly.
Which is more where this is coming from.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like. So, I mean, I think they're just starting to run out of ideas for zombies.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been nice to see it kind of tie in a little more with the overall theme, but like the zombie thing to me is just bonus. Yeah. Really, I'm not gonna like live or die something on the zombie mode in the Call of Duty series just because it's just meant to be there for fun and weirdness, and it's a little extra thing to play. And sometimes Black Ops 3 was almost you could play the game again with the zombie thing incorporated, so it was pure extra playtime, which is cool, no matter what form it takes. So we'll see what they do with it there.
Here's big news. Final Fantasy 15 delayed again. Keep in mind, Matt...
11 years just wasn't enough.
Keep in mind, Matt, that Square Enix put up a countdown clock. They counted down to when they were going to announce the release date. Then they did a countdown clock for the release date where they hit like this button that like reveals like the release date, and then it's delayed 2 months. And then the next day they announce it's gone gold.
So what?
Tabata has done a couple interviews from Gamescom. He put up this video on their YouTube channel saying that, the game's feature complete, essentially gold. They have like the master version of it, and they're spending 2 months just polishing the game.
Well, 2 months out of 11 years, that ought to make a big difference.
Is the delay a big deal to you at all, Matt?
No, I don't care about that game, really.
At all?
Not really. I mean, I'm going to play it. I have it pre-ordered because we're going to talk about it. If we weren't going to talk about it, I would probably just wait.
Yeah? Until it's cheaper, or just
cheaper, or just like after maybe late next spring when there's less to play and some I want something to do. I'm like, I guess I'll get around to Final Fantasy 15. It's not a urgent thing to me. The last Final Fantasy game I really, really liked was 6, which was when I was in high school, because that's pretty much when there's an old saying, the golden age of science fiction is 12, meaning that everything you read science fiction or see science fiction wise when you're 12 is the best science fiction because that's when you kind of get into it. Yeah. That's sort of how I feel about Final Fantasy. Yeah. It's like when you're 12, that's the greatest thing ever.
It's the bee's knees.
But if you played Final Fantasy, and I've seen this to be true with many people we know, including Justin Facino, very famously, our friend Justin Facino, loves Final Fantasy VII. And early on, this is when he was very, very young, starting out as a PA on X-Play, and I'm like this, but this and this and this. I mean, there's no way you could have liked that stupid game unless you were 12. And he goes, I was 12. And as someone who was 21 when that game came out, I was just like, oh. Yeah. Well, that explains it.
I mean, my last Final Fantasy I really enjoyed was Final Fantasy IX. That's the last one that
9 is the best of the PlayStation. 9 is the only PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy I would say is good. Yeah. And then I actually like 12 a lot. But I think 12 is more... at the time, I was like, oh, this is so different, and it kind of incorporates MMO ideas and all this, and like the story sort of vanishes through most of the middle of that. Otherwise, it's basically a retelling of Star Wars.
Right.
And like I'm very curious how much I'll like Final Fantasy XII when the remake comes out. Like if I'll be able to still get into it. But to me, the pinnacle was 6. And ever since then, it's just sort of I'm still playing these games as sort of like out of obligation,
going through the motions.
That I feel like
you have to.
I feel like I have to because I one of them might be good again one day, and I want to be there when it happens. And also, like, they're just, like, kind of part of the zeitgeist of being a core gamer.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just, like, it feels like, even though I didn't like 13, it felt like I had to play it to sort of know what was going on.
Yeah.
I admit I didn't play the other 2. I played, like, an hour of 13-2, and I was like, oh, that's interesting, and then I never turned it on again. Like,
So here's the thing, Matt. So the day after, when they announced
I don't know what they think 2 months is going to do on this thing. I mean, we saw what 2 months did to No Man's Sky.
A game that's that
Nothing.
big, probably not much. But here's the thing. So they announced the delay, and then they say in that same announcement, look, tomorrow we're putting out an hour of footage of the game, brand new footage. And so the footage came out, and I watched it, and I have to admit that I'm kind of hyped for the game now.
Yeah?
Did you watch it, the hour long? So it's not continuous footage, and it appears to start at the very beginning of the game, but they cut out, like, the boring parts. Like, they'll cut out the traveling, they'll cut out the driving in the car.
So it's a 4-hour gameplay clip cut down to 1.
Cut down to an hour, kind of, yeah. Which is a little
There's going to be a
weird.
lot of long conversations in that damn convertible. That's what I'm really predicting there's going to be a lot of chatter.
Yeah, so you're watching that right now, the hour-long gameplay that they put out. And I've got to say, in that hour's time, and again, they've truncated it down, but it shows off a lot of the game.
I mean, it's certainly. I haven't watched the whole thing. I've only seen
It's
snippets.
beast of a game.
But it certainly is a better showing than E3.
Oh yeah. It
feels like they knew they had to come at this with some teeth after that.
I'll say one thing though: the writing is so bad.
Well, yeah.
It is so bad. Like you were saying, conversations in the car. In this clip, they have several conversations in the car, and they are the most banal, idiotic. I just don't know what they're thinking, man. Like, it's like they did not ever hire, like, an English consultant to work on this game. Like,
part of it, I think,
and maybe part of it is it's made for the 12-year-old.
Well, yeah. But part of it...
This is you're right, though. This is the franchise
a lot of stuff
that has not managed to transcend that to become something that adults can enjoy playing without feeling
But there's also sort of a thing with that, and I've run into in Japanese media where a lot of what we would think would be aimed at either older teenagers, college age, or above, in Japan seems to be more targeted towards younger middle school era. And like you even run into that
thing too. Maybe
somewhat,
in Japanese,
but it really is a
hokey.
different audience targeting situation that I've run into a lot, especially as a Transformers fan, because Transformers in America and the West are basically for like older preteen, but maybe 8 to 13-year-old is sort of the sweet spot for Transformers, as we know. And then there's a lot of adult fans as well that grew up with it. In Japan, Transformers is targeted at preschoolers.
Yeah,
like it's and like you watch the shows.
Kids cartoon when we were kids.
Yeah, but it wasn't aimed at kids that young. We're talking about
like middle school kids.
Right, like all the Transformers stuff in Japan is aimed at like very, very young kids, and that's just sort of how it is.
Yeah.
And because if you're an adult, you watch Gundam.
Right.
And so it's a different mentality, and I think JRPGs are sort of assumed to be targeted at sort of a more of a middle school area, and a lot of translation work just doesn't try to bring elevate that, because on one hand, fans want a direct translation. They don't want an adaptation. They want to know what these characters were saying in Japanese, just say it in English. Yeah. And that is not always what you want necessarily, because sometimes this stuff is really dumb.
Yeah.
And
it is. These conversations in this game are stupid, but I have to say that in the hour's time, what they showed to me was really impressive. Like all the systems in the game, the merchants, again, not just the conversations in the car, all the conversations are just stupid. And that's a shame, because if it's a really long game, a lot of times you kind of need that narrative to keep you going. Mm-hmm. So I do have concerns about the game over the long haul, but I will say after watching this big chunk of it, I am a bit emboldened for the game now. Like, I am excited to play the game. I feel like it's going to be a really meaty experience. You're going to be able to sink your teeth into. It feels like it has a lot of idiosyncrasies to it, a lot of nuance to it. Combat still looks,
Yeah.
It just doesn't have a flow to it.
Yeah, there's
I'm hoping... a lot to do. Like, the grapple hook is way bigger of an element in the combat than I ever thought it was.
I'm just hoping
watching their testers play.
I'm just hoping that demo we played from earlier in the year was not necessarily representative of the full-fledged combat system.
Yeah, I mean, there's more depth to it. Like, you can see it in this video that there's much more to the combat than that. It still looks a little clunky and odd at times.
And I think it still looks like a PS3 game, up-res. I mean, it looks like a remaster.
Yeah, basically. There's a couple moments in this where it looks pretty good, too. Like I said, like my opinion was kind of like right where yours was until I watched this. And I feel like I'm starting to come around a little bit for this game. And you're right, 2 months isn't going to do a lot for a game. You can only accomplish so much in 60 days. I mean, think about that. 60 days for me flies by like it's a freaking week anymore.
I mean, clearly we're looking at a big day one patch, basically.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't believe it's like the end of the summer right now. Like, I feel like this whole summer has just been a big blur. So 60 days when you're developing a game really isn't squat, as they've proven 11 years later working on this. But even if they could fix up a little bit of the bugs before we all get our hands on it, like, it's just going to improve the game.
At this point, I'm just like, get the game done and out so that you can refocus your efforts on Kingdom Hearts 3. Because, like, it's time.
Yeah.
Like, no, does anyone...
Rumors Kingdom Hearts may be coming to NX, by the way. Also, rumors Dragon Quest Builders might be coming to NX.
That would make sense. Kingdom Hearts makes sense as an NX
Oh, it
game.
makes perfect sense. Like, if Nintendo were smart, it would throw tons of money at Square to make it
If Nintendo were smart, they would not only throw tons of money for that, but they'd throw tons of money to bring over ports of the HD remixes.
Yep, you're absolutely
and have the whole Kingdom Hearts series available on the NX.
Yep. Things starting to fall in line a little bit for NX now.
Maybe.
Should be about a month and a half away from seeing it. Not even.
Yeah, next month sometime.
Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. But, I was pleasantly surprised by what I saw. Obviously, I wasn't playing it. So I didn't get the feel for the combat. It does look a little janky watching the video.
I was not impressed by the comments, I think it was today, about how the ultimate edition for that game is like, what? Was it like
180?
Yeah,
and no season pass?
Does not include the season pass.
What is up with that lately?
And they're like, oh, we can't do it. I'm like, yes, you can do it.
There was the other collector's edition that didn't have the game. Was that Battlefield 1 or something?
That was Halo. That was Halo 5.
What the?
It just didn't have the disc. It had a code in it.
No. There's one that doesn't have anything. It was just announced like a month ago. I think it's Battlefield 1. There's like one version of it that doesn't come with the game at all.
That's weird.
Really weird. I don't know what they're thinking.
But it's like, you know what? Like, if you really wanted to, Square, you could just have a thing where you set up a site where people go and like put in their proof of purchase or whatever for the Ultimate Edition, and you send them a season pass code. Yep. That's what should happen there.
Yep.
It won't, but that's what should happen there.
Yeah. So let's move on. Let's talk about Battlefield 1, another one of, if you're talking about...
Also, season passes for JRPGs. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, what is up with that? If you're talking about the top 3 or 4 games from Gamescom, Battlefield 1 is undoubtedly one of them, certainly one of the biggest games. So for the first time, they showed horse combat. And it looks really cool.
Yeah.
But it makes no sense whatsoever. Like, the footage that they're showing, and I saw, like, raw multiplayer, too, where people were playing with the horses. It was in their official live stream. You have, like, a horse running alongside an armored vehicle. Like, is that realistic? Is that accurate? Historically accurate?
Oh, yeah.
Why? Why would you...
Because that's what they had. World War I was the first modern war, and like, they didn't have that many tanks at the beginning.
They just didn't have enough.
Basically, like, you were still using the old tech, and the old tech was horses to some degree. You know, it's not as pronounced as it was in reality. But like, the famous stories of like part of the reason Poland had such a problem with the Nazis at the beginning of World War II was a lot of their defensive stuff was still based around that era of tech. There were horses pulling artillery, and like you can't fight a blitzkrieg like that.
Yeah,
and like you would because artillery needs escorts, infantry escorts, and if you're on horses, you can move faster. So that was a real thing. But in the end, horses were, I think, if I recall correctly, horses were basically just too material consumptive to be worth it, so they stopped doing it.
Yeah, you have to feed them and everything.
You have to put the horse somewhere.
Yeah.
You know? You can't just park it and be like,
there you go.
And then you have, like, there's a waste disposal problem, or if you have to camp somewhere along it. So, yeah, horses didn't last long, especially when the motorcycle came along.
Well, here's my point. It's like, so you're playing a first-person shooter, and you're trying to shoot humans who have thin limbs and can move very erratically, very quickly. You're riding a horse. Like, it just seems so easy to just shoot the horse and kill the horse. Like,
yeah.
I guess that's the risk reward. Yeah. Like,
another reason we don't use horses much anymore.
Yeah, I mean, the balance that has to go into that to make it work seems
horse-mounted cavalry made more sense when, like, a gunshot would only go where you wanted it to about 25% of the time.
When you're using a musket, yeah.
But like this was,
you're using rifles.
But that is I don't know if it's going to be fun to play, but it is a real thing where, like, World War I was sort of this trial by fire of, like, oh, war's different now.
Yeah.
And people had started, the Franco-Prussian War and the Boer War had sort of taught us that to some degrees. And Boer Wars where the British invented concentration camps.
Right.
But World War I was really, it was the Great War, the war to end all wars, because the idea was like, holy crap, we just, well, yeah. But the idea was we just, we saw, it was even called World War I at the time.
Yeah, I know.
Because people were like, it's the first global mechanized war.
Everyone's going at it, yeah.
This was the war that created the idea of war crimes for the most part. Yeah. Because it's like, oh, wow, we can really do some damage now with this kind of material, and we can do some horrific things that we should, like, we should make some rules.
Right.
And
not that anyone follows them even today.
And this kind of, like, crazy mix of, like, these, like, ancient warfare ideas and material combined with, like, what was at the time cutting edge. Like, that was very common, especially early on in the war, when people realized, like, yeah, this ain't gonna work. It's like, no one was dumb enough to ride a horse in a battle, probably by the end of that thing. But, like, yeah, that's a believable thing. And again, I don't know if that's going to be fun to play, but I can see if you're making this game that you see that situation and you're like, oh, we got to do that. Like,
here's what
it's very. I'm sure it's very hard to resist the idea of, like, like jousting, in some kind of situation like that. If you're designing this game and you're like, oh, we got to make that.
Here's what I would say.
Especially Battlefield is so much about vehicles.
Yeah, but here's the thing. So I don't know how much you played Battlefield 4. But, Battlefield, ever since, I believe Battlefield 2 was the first Battlefield to have squads, if I remember correctly.
That sounds right.
And so, there's a lot of aimless running in Battlefield. Even with squads, where you can spawn on your squad, there are tons of times, even in Battlefield 4, where you are just running by yourself for, like, a mile or more sometimes, trying to get to the heat of the battle. Sometimes you spawn on your squad, and they still haven't made it to the battle yet. And so
because the only guy who's alive just respawned and is still running.
Right. So maybe the horses are being instituted to mitigate
get you there.
They're like, look, once you get there, if the horse dies, so what? At least you got to the fight more quickly.
I figure that's what that is.
That's where I could see
it's like Jeeps.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone
or
ditches
the buggies.
everyone ditches in Battlefield 1, the original Battlefield. That was the whole thing. Battlefield 1942. You just everybody pile on the Jeep, and as soon as you get there, everybody jumps out of the Jeep, and you let the Jeep just roll and crash into. Hopefully it crashes into, like, some guy at the flag and blows up or something.
Or some other vehicle.
Yeah, but no one. Yeah, oh yeah, the suicide Jeep runs into the tanks. That was fun too.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that's what they use it for. If it's just another vehicle in the game.
Look, if I can strap, like, explosives to the horse and do that,
and smack him.
No,
yes.
I bet you can.
That would be awesome.
I bet you can do that.
But that'll never happen.
No?
Dude, PETA would lose it if
they're not real horses.
They don't care.
PETA doesn't matter.
PETA does matter.
No, it doesn't.
Not to us.
They're a bunch of crazies.
We're meat eaters.
No one cares.
People care about PETA.
Nah.
We'll see. But I just thought
nothing with
curious.
Bill Maher on the board of directors matters. I'm just saying that right off the bat.
But on the whole, I think the multiplayer looks great. And that's the key for Battlefield, because we all know the campaigns in Battlefield suck. And as awesome as the trailers look when they're all cut together, and it's so funny, too, how EA manages to fool people over and over again.
Hell, man, I could cut a trailer out of Battlefield 3's campaign and make you excited to play it all over again.
Well, they did.
Yeah.
I mean, they're really good at cutting their trailers together to make you think the campaign's going to be something worth playing, and then you play it, and it's absolutely
That's why you can never trust yourself on a trailer for any, not just games, movies. I can watch the trailer for Episode 1 of The Phantom Menace and still get excited for, oh my God, that movie looks awesome. That movie is not awesome. I know that movie is not awesome, but I can watch that trailer and be like, that's amazing. Like, the great trailers mean nothing.
You're right.
They mean
nothing. They
nothing.
can totally fool you. So people are all over Battlefield 1.
Editors are magicians.
Like,
Always remember
the
that.
comments on the trailer from Gamescom on Sifted are all like glowing. Oh my God, it looks so awesome. Like, they're doing what everybody does. They're forgetting that there were trailers for Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4 that also looked awesome, and then you actually played. I remember when I reviewed Battlefield 3 at GT, and the review went up, people were like, you are insane. They're like, how could I watch trailers for this game? This game, there's no way the campaign could be that bad. It turned out the campaign was like 2.5 or 3 hours long. It was just this really weird, awkward, like, they tried to build up emotion between the soldiers, and it just always fell flat. It was just bad. So,
which is funny because like the only good campaigns in the Battlefield series are the Bad Company games.
You're right. Yeah.
Which
You're
is because they were funny and they had characters.
Yep, exactly. And the writing was great.
Yeah.
And that makes a big
difference. The best line
in
the history of Battlefield is when I can't remember the name of the guy who's like the explosives guy in that, but at one point he's kind of the crazy obsessed with explosives dude, but like that's sort of his character.
Yeah.
But at one point it's in 2. The satellite comes flaming over their heads and crashes like in the field ahead of them, and he goes, "That is the greatest thing I've ever seen in my entire life." And I'm like, that is the best. That's the best line in all of Battlefield.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it was entirely motivated by character, and it wasn't like trying to make me go, "Ooh, look at the thing explode." It was like, no, you took that moment and you made it funny by remembering that you had human beings in your story.
Yep. Right before Gamescom, Bethesda announced what I thought. I thought Fallout 4's DLC was done. But it's not. There's another one coming out called Nuka-Cola. They're saying it is...
Nuka-Cola? Not Nuka World?
Nuka World, sorry. Takes place in a dilapidated amusement park.
They did show that at E3.
Yeah, they did. I don't know why it slipped my mind. For some reason, what was the last big DLC?
They did the last story-driven one was Point, whatever, the main one.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it for some reason.
Something Point.
Was it Point or something Bay or something?
It was, Harbor Point, Far Harbor?
Far Harbor.
Far Harbor.
There you go.
Where's the Point thing come from? I don't know. This is how memorable the DLC for this game
We just made the point right there. We couldn't remember the name of it. But that is the best DLC so far for Fallout 4.
Right.
It actually had
everything else just a toy, basically.
Yeah. I mean, they'll toss in a couple side missions and the other ones here and there.
I mean, the contraption thing was, it's just like, okay, it's fun in terms of like, it's a neat trick, but like, where's my mothership? Where's my old world blues? Where's that kind of thing?
So they're saying Nuka World is, I believe what I read was 4 to 5 times bigger than Far Harbor. If that's the case,
that's pretty big.
Did you play Far Harbor?
I dabbled.
Yeah, so did I. I think I played like
it's very hard
3
for me to
hours
get back into that game.
Yeah, me too, man. A lot of games like that, though, I've found, like open world action RPGs, I'm always reticent to go back and play them. Because I remember what it was like playing them and how I had to remember like all these little things that were going on and where I needed to go to do this and where I needed to go to do that. And I feel like if I've been away from a game like this for a long time, it's hard to go back and remember like what all the little systems are and the quirks about the game.
It can be, but like I booted up my save game of Skyrim for the first time in probably 3 or 4 years recently, and it was like just getting in a nice warm hot tub. Like it was
really?
Like everything just clicked. I'm like, oh, I remember that. I remember to do that. I remember that. Like the good stuff I remember, and like and New Vegas is like that too. Like, but Fallout 4, I'm just like, wait, what? What was this? Like, okay, sure. Oh, and I got to go back and talk to him. Like, it was like, there was none of that game. That game just slid off my brain like it was Teflon. Like
there's not a lot of memorable characters in the game. Like I don't know if the writing was. It wasn't that the writing was bad. It's just the way the characters were written. They just weren't all that interesting.
Far Harbor is smart in that it focuses on the detective guy, who is probably the
most
memorable
character,
thing in the game,
hands down. Yeah, without a doubt.
So so good on you for that.
Yeah.
But like, it didn't do anything to entice me back in.
Yeah.
And I don't know. And it's weird because it's like I am on like my 60th planet in No Man's Sky with the same damn trees and the same damn 8-legged cow creatures, and I'm just like, this is great. And I'm like, why don't I care?
Well,
why do I care about that? But I don't care about like the 15th skyscraper with the same ammo boxes in it.
Well, everyone's different. They have things that they.
I mean, the gameplay loop works for you or it doesn't, but like usually that Bethesda gameplay loop just pulled me right in. I mean, a lot of the wandering around planets on No Man's Sky presses that same dopamine button in my brain as wandering around Skyrim did.
Yeah.
But like for whatever reason, Fallout 4 just doesn't do it. And and Fallout 4 almost made me worry. I'm like, oh, does this kind of thing just not work for me anymore? And No Man's Sky proves like, oh yeah, it does. It absolutely does. It doesn't even need to be that good.
Right.
it just works, for me. And like, so I'm like, what is it about Fallout 4 that just doesn't?
It's just a
grab
very
me?
drab world that I don't like.
Yeah, I guess.
And so I don't have
not.
this like desire to go back and experience it again. I just don't. And so let's assume. In Far Harbor, what I played of it, I thought was pretty good. I thought it was kind of up there with some of the better quests in the main game. So let's imagine that Nuka World is 4 or 5 times bigger than Far Harbor and it is of the same quality. Does that save the Season Pass, Matt? Because this Season Pass has been a complete disaster.
I think it needed one more story expansion. I think it needed 3 story expansions. I don't know why I'm arriving at that conclusion, but I just think it needed one more.
I feel like Bethesda put way too much of an emphasis on the building part of the game. And I get it. It's with a new feature, and so you want to try to blow it out. But the bottom line is that I did what I needed to do to get through the campaign. I never sat there for hours and built stuff to see what it would do, or it's like, I need to construct a radio tower. When that tower was done, I moved on until I had to construct something else.
And I mean, I didn't have any, and it all seems to come from the second DLC for Skyrim. Was it Hearthstone, or that's that's
that's World of
Blizzard game. Hearth Realm or Hearth, I don't know. I don't know. But you had to build a bunch of houses and strand adopted orphans in them, basically. And like I was like, this is terrible. Like I'm like, oh wow, it's like that's what I wanted to do, was collect 80 logs that like I don't have room for in my incredibly limited inventory weight problem. And like that, they kind of made that one of the pillars of Fallout 4 is weird to me, but at the same time, my brother-in-law has built like this giant castle, basically, in Fallout 4.
People will get into it, yeah.
He's like, he has this home base that is like, looks like it could have been designed by the developers, And I'm like, wow, that's amazing.
Impressive.
I will never ever do that. So clearly, it works for some or maybe most of the people who have really gotten into this game. Yeah. I mean, he's like 200 hours into that thing. So I can't call it like a bad decision, but it certainly isn't a decision that brings me back, personally.
Season passes, to me, are like the biggest scam ever.
I mean, I got that season pass for like some ridiculous cheap price on one of those like, key thing. I think I paid like $10 for that thing.
Who expects you to buy something when you don't know what you're buying?
Well, the big problem on this one...
Can you think of any other part of the
world? Well, the big problem on this one to me is that they raised the price, and I still don't quite see why that happened.
It's like you would think that they were like working on like Nuka World, and like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. Like, we need to increase the price because we want to make this even bigger. I mean, look,
and maybe they did.
Maybe they did. Maybe Nuka World is just mind blowing. But if you suffered through the season pass so far right now, you're feeling a little salty because the money that you spent for it, even if you got it early for cheaper, to me, it's not worth what you paid.
Right. Like in my mind, my character is just standing next to like this giant Rube Goldberg device from the Contraptions DLC, just like this angry face on her. Just it's like, great. It builds ammo.
Yeah.
Like. It does things that I didn't need anything to do, really.
Well, it's like even in the base game, whenever I built, fortified my base or whatever, like, it was rarely needed. Like, I think my base was actually, like, invaded, like, 3 times.
I was invaded a couple.
Even though I built, like, the bare minimum, like, I'd come back and all the dead bodies are just laying around. Like,
more people will show up.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't have any attachment.
No, I mean, like, the enemy bodies would be, like, lying around from, like, where my turrets, like, cut them down or whatever.
I just didn't care. So, I mean, I hope it's good and interesting and make some people feel like they got their money's worth out of that season pass, but that's going to have to be one hell of an amusement park, folks.
For real. So today it was leaked out that Assassin's Creed, the Ezio collection, is on the way. A remaster of Assassin's Creed 2, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, and Assassin's Creed Revelations. I believe I got that right. How excited are you for this?
Well, I have them on PC, so not
What's the point?
too much, but like it's cool that they're doing that. I think Brotherhood is the best game in the series.
Agreed. I think that's consensus winner, definitely.
It seems to be. It's either
that's where it hit the sweet spot.
Right.
That's
most people either say 2 or Brotherhood, and Brotherhood's pretty much Brotherhood really probably should have been the last third of 2.
Yeah.
Brotherhood really feels like we had to cut the last act of 2 out in Rome, and we just sort of made it its own game. But they added enough and changed. That's also the first one that really feels like you're the leader of an assassin's guild, and you can call in people, and you're training people and doing all. And like beyond that, like and on the flip side,
that was the sweet spot.
Right.
After that, it became bloat.
Yeah, Revelations I think is not very good. It's one of my bottom 3 of the series.
Yeah, I didn't enjoy it either.
My absolute rock bottom would be 3. I didn't like 3 at all.
I really liked 3.
I didn't like. I just 3. Here's the thing: is like 3 was really where the optional stuff started to piss me off.
Yeah.
And I think Black Flag did it better, where it doesn't tell you the optional objectives unless you go looking for them in the pause screen. Like whereas like you're just playing like 3, and I mean it's introduced in Brotherhood, but I think it's handled better in Brotherhood and to some degree Revelations, and 3 is where it hits this point where, like, if you're just playing a mission the way you want to play a mission, and then suddenly this big red X pops up, and it's like, you didn't kill this guy in this weird particular way using this item you don't even have to do that. And it's like, well, like, never tell me I'm playing the game wrong. Like, that's just, I hate
That's where the series started losing its way a little bit. But I actually enjoyed 3, because I liked the variety. I loved the ship combat. I liked that
the ship combat was the best part, for sure.
I loved the setting. I loved the whole Native American thing that was going on. It just felt different. It had a completely different setting, a completely different group of people, completely different concerns among and look, I get it. A lot of people had bug issues with that game. I had no bugs.
I didn't have too many bugs in that.
Yeah.
I don't remember anything really.
But who are they selling this to, Matt?
I don't know. Who hasn't played? I mean, they already did an Ezio collection.
I mean, are they trying to find the kids who were 7 years old when they came out and are now 15 or 16? Or is that who they're trying to sell it to?
I don't. Or maybe. I mean, there is a very dedicated fan base
for sure.
that will probably just triple dip on these things. My girlfriend probably will.
But to your point, I mean, you can find these games. I see them on sale all the time on Steam or whatever for like $5.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, I get.
Well, not that. I mean, they go down to the early ones go down to $9.99, and post 2 goes down to $19.99. They never Ubi never really discounts those things too heavily. It's weird, but
and I get not everyone has PCs, so not everyone can say, well, I've had access to this crazy.
Right. And there are people I know that they sold their old system to get the new system, and there's probably people that would really like to be able to still play Assassin's Creed games on the PS4, even though they got rid of their PS3 or their 360. So that makes sense. It's just, I can only presume that there was not a very difficult remastered job because it
had the PC version already to build off.
Right,
of.
And then on the flip side, that makes me wonder. Okay, what are these things going to look like? Most remasters are pretty good. If Blue Point does a remaster, you're in good hands. I would say they're pretty much the masters of the remaster, but. I don't think it's unfair to say that it's smart to be skeptical of Ubisoft ports in general.
I think it's a really good assumption.
Anyone who was unfortunate enough to pick up the Prince of Persia collection will know that, which was a disaster.
It was,
And part of me is just sort of like, well, I think as much as I would like to go back and play these things again, I'm gonna wait and see what those reviews look like because.
I will not go back and play them. I don't have time to play stuff.
If I did go back and play them, I would play my copies on Steam that I got for in a bundle for ridiculously low prices because it's going to look either the same or better.
Yeah.
So why not? But I mean, it's cool that they haven't forgotten about Ezio. It's nice to see the series sort of it's probably just like a chance to kind of be like, hey, remember Assassin's Creed? There isn't one this year, but remember when it was good.
That looks like that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
They're like, we don't have a game this year, so let's just put out the old ones.
I mean,
it makes sense.
They're the ones to put out.
I mean, that was one of the big questions on Pactor Factor this week. And this actually segues nicely because also kind of announced yesterday is that EA is open to the idea of remastering Mass Effect.
Mm-hmm. That's a long way out.
It's money. I mean, ultimately, that's what it really comes down to, is it's easy money for these publishers. They can pay some little port house like Blue Point to build these games on a shoestring budget, spend $5-10 million, and make hundreds of millions off of them.
All over a Mass Effect remaster, especially
the
because
first one.
All of
or
them.
You mean all of them?
All three of them. Because first off, they need to be unified. Second, the DLC never goes on sale on Origin, barely. I mean, it did real quick for like a couple months ago that I scooped it up for Mass Effect 2 and all that. But it's just so hard to get them all in one place. Mass Effect 3 is not on Steam. Mass Effect 1 and 2 are. Like, it's...
the release for that franchise has been all scattershot. Then you have, like, the Wii U stuff.
Yeah, the Wii U version of 3, and then... And I would love to have... a version that is just the Mass Effect trilogy in one thing. Maybe not one disc. But like, maybe one file, you open it up, pick which, the save files transfer over automatically. Maybe they can fix that Conrad Werner.
I'm really surprised that works, but...
Maybe you can fix that. I mean, I don't mean the old save files. I mean, like, you just play through it in that trilogy thing, and like you don't have to, stuff is just all sort of self-contained, but it's just having everything there sort of in one place would be nice. With some updated textures, because particularly Mass Effect 1 is an ugly game.
To me, that's the one that needs remastered.
Well,
I don't know about the other two, though.
The others could use an upgrade. Not like the first one, but like the first one needs a full texture overhaul. It needs controller support, which it still doesn't have. You have to use community-made hacks to do that.
Which is insane.
I mean, I know they wouldn't do it, but I would love to see Mass Effect 1 redone like 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Like, just take the story and everything remains the same, but you just redo the gameplay and the game.
That'll never
happen. That would be way too much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, they stand to make a lot of money off of these. I don't know if it would be too much.
Well, I also don't think they've even started.
Yeah.
So we'd be talking about something.
Well,
maybe
they've only said that like they're open to it, which actually for me I think I like a little more because that means there's more time that's going to pass before these come out. Because I think there needs to be more time. I've said it before that games from last gen do not need to be remastered. Like, just go back and play them. And now with backwards compatibility on Xbox One and everything, like, I just don't understand why people are playing these games and paying. In some cases, more, not always. A lot of times, you'll get like the 3 games for like $80 or whatever.
Well, I think you're running
for 60.
I think you're running into a situation where a lot of people are finding the offerings of this generation to be subpar in a lot of ways, and there's going to be a lot of people going back to play their favorites from last gen. And I mean that backwards compatibility. I mean, what is that up to? They said 143 million hours played of backwards compatibility on the Xbox One. That's a lot. And backwards compatibility has a notorious reputation as being something that most people don't use up until this generation.
I would also say, though, we are talking about Xbox One. And Xbox One hasn't exactly provided as many compelling experiences as far as new experiences are concerned, compared to the PlayStation 4.
That's true. But there's also, I think, the appeal that you can play those backwards compatible things and use the Xbox One streaming service.
For sure, yeah.
Which is a much, you don't have to hook up an Elgato or whatever. And there's a market for it's almost like the same reason they're making Andromeda with the Mass Effect logo on it is because like, hey, like, are you more likely to look at a brand new game you've never seen before? It's like, or you're more it's like, hey, someone's playing Mass Effect. I'll watch that for a little bit.
Right.
And who knows how many people get suddenly stuck watching somebody do a live stream of that. It makes sense, and it's funny that EA hasn't jumped on the bandwagon, but I'm excited to see that
looks like it is now.
They do, not just because
it's leaving a lot of money on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I would buy a Mass
Effect. I'm like, hell yeah, you put those damn
you do it, especially if it's taking this long to get Andromeda out. For God's sake, maybe you might want.
Still wasn't shown in Gamescom.
At some point, maybe you might want to remind people what that series is. Because it's been years.
At this point, they may be able to get those remasters done before Andromeda.
Yeah. Well, Mass Effect 3 was 4.5 years ago.
I know. Well, it's funny, too, because people have accused EA of being like money grubbers all this time, and they're actually the one publisher that isn't doing this and cashing in on these old games.
The only retro EA stuff, really, is through GOG, and that's real retro. I mean, no
one... old Command and Conquer.
Yeah, no one's cashing in on Starflight.
Yeah. They'll do the same thing with VR they did with remasters. They'll jump in late. And let everyone else make all the mistakes.
And what it looks like they're doing with the NX.
Yeah, you're right. Well, they did mention today, EA did, that it's thinking about the NX.
It sure looks like it might be a good thing.
That's it.
Maybe. It's like the absolute most diplomatic way to say, like, if it's successful, we'll put some Madden and FIFA on it, whatever. You know.
Well, they probably would not put Madden on it, actually.
Maybe not.
They typically don't put out Madden for Nintendo consoles if they're wavering on the console.
Although I have to think, having your own... That was one of the great things about NFL 2K on the Dreamcast was you had your own screen for play calling.
Yeah.
I always liked that a lot. So it's funny that
on your VMU.
Yeah, but then again, who knows what the other controllers are like on the NX? Just like the Wii U, like one person had the cool controller, everybody else had to use last gen's controllers.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So we'll see. Still not a fan of remasters, but I understand that there are people out there who are young still and maybe didn't get a chance to play.
I think Mass Effect 1 would justify it, even if they didn't do the other two. A Mass Effect 1 remaster would be handy.
So, did you get a chance to check out any of the Sea of Thieves gameplay that's been coming out of Gamescom?
I did not.
We're finally getting big chunks of the game that kind of shows what's going on.
I watched it for a while at E3, but I haven't seen anything new.
Basically, the game is exactly what we thought it was. There's really nothing all that unique that was shown off at Gamescom, and that way I guess I'm maybe a little disappointed. I think it still looks like a cool and a fun game. Instruments are a much bigger part of the game than I ever thought that they were.
Yeah, there's a lot of music playing in this game because pirates are musical men.
I was
and
not
women.
aware of that, actually, but
sea shanties are the core of the pirate experience, as we all know.
Yeah.
As anyone who played Black Flag can tell you.
Yeah. I feel like my interest in this game has gone like up and down and up and down, and now it's kind of back down again. Like, it just doesn't look like there's enough meat to the gameplay in this game. And that's something that typically Rare has been great with. So I'm a little surprised. Maybe we're seeing the first chinks in the armor of the new Rare.
Well, this is almost the first real game they've made in how long. And it looks like a lot of the people that made Rare what Rare was are making Yooka-Laylee.
Which looks amazing, so...
I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to stick some googly eyes on those pirate ships. I'm just saying.
How funny would that be?
You got a pedigree to live up to here, guys.
But, I mean, look, I get the whole multiplayer cooperative element of it and how that could be really fun and exciting. But you know what I've also found is that, like, you see modes like this and they seem really great when you're watching trailers or gameplay footage that's all staged, which is what we've seen so far of this game. When the game gets out in the wild, though, and you don't have 6 friends who are on Xbox Live, when you want to play and you have to just play with a bunch of randoms, like, it generally sucks.
Yeah, that's why I'm
because
really...
Because you just get griefers of people who just want to ruin everyone else's time.
Yeah, that's why I'm really hard lobbying all my Star Trek friends to get a PlayStation VR headset so I have someone to play the Star Trek Bridge Crew thing with.
Well, I'll have it.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, that seems... a lot of these games, especially the games that are all about co-op and all about... I mean, Overwatch as well. Like, playing that with random sucks. Like if it's all about working together and kind of like knowing the game and knowing what you need to do and how to support each other, like you have to have a group of regular people you're playing with, or that game's just not going to live up to what it can be.
Almost every game is like that, though. Really, like League of Legends is like that too. You have one bad teammate, it just ruins it for everybody. Literally, you lose. You have one person out of your team that decides that they want to be a jerk, you lose. And the way that game is set up is that, like, unless somebody drops out before the game starts, you have to wait for the 20-minute mark before you can even surrender. So you're forced to play through this 20-minute time of game knowing that you're just going to surrender at the end. It's just, it sucks. And it happens with every game where you have teams. It's like, the bigger the team, the less issues you have with it. But if you have a game where it's like 4 or 5 people working together, one person like doesn't do their job. In this game especially, where you need like one guy manning the guns and one guy driving the ship and another guy on lookout. Like, if you have one person who isn't doing their job in this game, it could totally suck. And trying to organize people, especially at our age, where everyone doesn't have a ton of time to just sit around and play games all the time, is very patchwork and spotty. It's like, for us, we dedicate time to it because it's what we do. But to all our friends who have other jobs and just play games when they can, and maybe they have kids or whatever, like, it's pretty much impossible to get 5 or 6 of our friends together to play a game at once at the same exact time.
Like maybe the first week of a big release.
Maybe the first 2 days the game comes out is what I found. Like, at that time, just keeps getting smaller and smaller. It used to be a week.
Yeah.
Like, 6 years ago, it was a week. It seems like every year you chop a day off of that. Until now, it's like launch night. Maybe you can find 6 or 7 people on to play with. The next night, there's 3 or 4. The next night after that, and then on, it's just scattershot.
And then sometimes I have things like, where is whoever? Because they were always here. And then, you go over to the Xbox One, watching TV.
Yep.
It's just like...
Exactly right. So I'm a little nervous about this game. It's funny that I'm way more excited for kind of the next game from the splinter of Rare than I am for Rare proper. But like you said, it hasn't really made a proper game in...
Been a while.
A long time. What was the last proper game it made? Was it Cameo?
Nuts and Bolts?
Yeah, I guess Banjo-Kazooie, Nuts and Bolts, yeah.
I mean, then they had to start making the
Which I was incredibly disappointed in.
Yeah, oh yeah. They had to start making the bottom of Avatar shoes after that.
Yeah, and they got into the whole, Connect, sports stuff and all that.
Connect-the-moles and all that stuff.
And that was it. I mean, yeah. I guess Viva Pinata...
Yeah, Rare Replay.
Ones. Yeah.
I mean, that was a solid collection.
Yeah, but it's not a new game.
No, but they had to work on it.
Yeah.
But they did a good job, I thought. But we haven't seen real output from an actual game from them in forever.
Yeah.
And when you start talking about online multiplayer, you're going back to Perfect Dark Zero.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Yep. So For Honor, I know it's a game that you're really excited for. Definitely more excited for it than I am. When they first showed the game, they showed multiplayer. That was the first thing that they showed. And then at E3, they kind of went and showed the campaign and said, hey, there's actually single player in this. Now at Gamescom, they've kind of reverted back, and they went back to showing multiplayer. Did you get a chance to watch any of the media for it?
A little bit.
What do you think of it?
I'm interested, but I'm not as interested as the campaign.
Yeah.
Because, and here's the thing, I don't actually have any concrete ideas or examples of this, but I just feel like the combat system works real well in the single player, and I feel like the multiplayer, people are going to find ways to cheese this thing so hard that it's not going to be fun to play.
It looks so damn boring. The video that they just put out has I guess I don't know which class it is, but it just has a huge freaking sword, and it's just Fwachank, 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 and then there's some guy standing next to him. Fwachank, Fwachank. And it just looks like this spammy cluster of nothing.
Well, against actual humans, it'll be interesting because you always have to be on active guard about what direction things are coming from, and taking the animation cues and all that kind of thing. So there's a lot of potential for strategy and depth to how this is going to work on a player versus player level. But my feeling is there's going to be some cracks in the armor or the foundation of this thing that are going to someone's going to figure out some way to make it so if you do this certain move like this, the way the game calculates the lag or the ping means that no one can react to it in time.
Right.
Or people are going to find ways to cheese this. It's like the way I was excited. I'm always excited for various things, and it's like Battlefield, where it was everybody's running across the thing. It's it's war, and everybody's running up D-Day, and then of course you actually play the game Omaha Beach, and everybody's dolphin diving. Everyone's and it just looks ridiculous, but it's so effective. Everybody has to do it.
Yeah.
And so I feel like For Honor is. I'm worried that For Honor is going to fall victim to something like that in multiplayer, where it's just somewhere in there's going to be some the combat system is going to be something that's you play it like this, but if you do this stupid thing, everyone's going to die, and then everybody has to do this stupid thing, and then it's not fun anymore.
It just looked boring as crap to me, watching the media coming out of Gamescom. It looks good. Visually, it looks great. I love the ideas behind the game. Everything I've read and saw about the multiplayer, it looks like they have the right idea. But one of the things that really attracted to me to this game in the first place was kind of the more strategic sword combat, and how it wasn't, at least I felt like, it wasn't going to just be about who could spam the the fierce attack button the fastest.
Well,
Was
it
gonna win.
isn't. If you play, like, that's the thing is, I don't think this game, and I've felt the same way about the E3 press conference videos and demo they did, where I don't think this game shows well in terms of how it feels to play it.
No.
Like, watching a video of it just doesn't get
right.
it across.
And this may be like the worst case scenario of that, what they showed at Gamescom.
And it might be that they were trying to make it seem more action-packed and more hack and slashy, and by doing that, they've ended up sort of making it just look brainless.
Yeah.
But what I played was not brainless at all, and makes me wonder how people who play things brainlessly are going to make it be brainless at the expense of the combat system. Like, I'm sure there's going to be some day one cheese moves that are going to just, like, ruin it for people. Yeah,
It's usually an easy fix, though. You can just change a few frames here and there and get around that stuff.
But my focus is much more on the campaign on this game, because at least the AI plays by the rules.
You're right.
So.
Yeah. Which is odd. Like, for me, I was first excited about the multiplayer, and now I'm kind of with you. Like, I'm more excited to play the campaign. And I wasn't as excited about the campaign as you were coming out of E3. I still thought it looked cool and fun. But another game that my interest is starting to dwindle a little bit in over time. So,
right there next to, same day as Persona 5.
Yeah.
So.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Like, they're completely... Here's Persona 5.
Yeah, but those are both games...
Here's For Honor.
Those are both games that you seem to be having second thoughts about.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, those are and both on the same day, as you mentioned.
Both on my birthday.
Yeah, look at that. That's great that a game that you're really excited for comes out on your birthday.
2 of them.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
What will I do first? For Honor, probably.
Will it be first? For
yeah, because I'm pretty... Yeah, I know what we're getting in Persona
You also
5.
know you'll probably be able to finish For Honor in 10 to 15 hours,
right.
probably.
For Honor's a weekend. Persona's like, I'll see you in March.
Exactly. Maybe. Because there'll be other stuff coming out, too, that'll sidetrack you a little bit here and there.
Also because that's February, and, like, holy crap, February.
Yeah, it's looking awesome. That's also my birthday month.
Horizon Zero Dawn right on top of it.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, so we did things a little bit differently on this week's episode, but we are going to keep some things the same. For instance, we are still doing a trailer of the week this week, and just today, Blizzard put out another one of its amazing pieces of CG for Overwatch, and the irony of this is that I absolutely hate the character that it's based on. Character is Bastion, and if you guys have played Overwatch, then you know that he's the big robot with the big guns that can transform into a turret. I think the guy's cheap. I know people are going to write in the comments that, like, they're going to list 8,000 ways to counter the guy. I know there's ways to counter Bastion. I still hate him. I hate that I have to think about ways just to counter this character. And I feel like Blizzard knows that there are lots of people like me who are not fans of Bastion, because this trailer does everything it can to make you love him.
Oh, but the bird. The bird.
I mean, look, I totally get it. They try to humanize him because he's a robot and whatnot. But and so I'll give him a pass for the moments that I watched that that CG sequence. But I'm still not a fan of him in the game. In fact, I refuse to play as him in the game just out of principle.
There are plenty of people who are fans of him.
Oh yeah,
in
for
place
sure.
of you.
It was a great piece of CG though, by the way. That was really good stuff.
Oh yeah, well Blizzard always does the best.
Without a doubt. So we're not live streaming, so we aren't taking questions out of the chat, but earlier today we did reach out to you guys for some questions, and you guys jumped on it real quick, and so we are going to answer them. The first one is from Reveng. He didn't add the E on the end. Hey guys, do you think if Microsoft has success with its Play Anywhere, will we see Sony and Nintendo follow the trend?
I don't see how they could.
Well, they could.
Like, as in putting stuff on Windows?
Yeah. I mean, they could build their own sort of Windows app.
Nintendo, they'll never do that.
No, I agree. It'll never happen.
No.
But I also see Reveng's point, like, Microsoft is kind of out ahead of the game here a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, it was also kind of mentioned today that, you know, this would probably be the last console generation. You know, Microsoft mentioned at Gamescom this week that, like, console generations are gone. And we didn't hear that from Nintendo or Sony, mind you.
Yeah, well, Microsoft can say a lot of things.
Right.
I remember used games were over
yeah.
for a while there, too. I don't think Microsoft gets to decide that. Yeah. But we'll see. We'll see.
I mean,
I mean, certainly I think the idea of, there's an argument to be made that if Microsoft and Sony play its cards a certain way, the idea of generations having these discrete stop and start times and systems having specific numbers that designate a particular generation might be ending.
Yeah. I think that is over.
Yeah, it might be more of a cell phone model now.
And then Nintendo might stick to it.
Nintendo, who knows? I don't even know. Like, we
Who
don't
knows
know
what
enough.
Nintendo's going to do?
We don't know enough about the NX and how, we don't know what it is, how it's going to work, how much it's going to cost, and how many it's going to sell, and what Nintendo's reaction to this one failing would be, or what Nintendo's reaction to this one succeeding would be. Like, I don't know what they're going to do next.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what their plan is. We have to see what this thing is. We have a pretty good idea, but...
Like, I would say in the immediate future, no, I don't think Sony or Nintendo would do it, but let's talk about, like, 10 years from now.
I mean, if the console just purely goes the way of like a compact PC box you can stick next to the television,
it's kind of already gone there.
Yeah, but like, it would have to be a situation where Sony, for some reason, thinks it's still worth it to court people with PCs who don't want consoles, and that will take a lot of convincing of that company.
Yeah,
because they are always going to see that PlayStation brand as propping up that whole company, which it does on the regular.
Right now, it is the whole company.
And stepping away from that to kind of concede to Microsoft's OS for some of it is going to be a very different world for them. And I think it would take a catastrophe for Sony to finally come around to that pivot.
I think inevitably it's going to happen, though.
It probably will a decade from now.
Yeah.
Unless things work out very differently than we're foreseeing, or the way it's going right now.
But in the short term, no way. Like, if you're saying, like...
Yeah, if you're waiting for Bloodborne, like, no.
Yeah, if you're wondering, like, once the PlayStation Neo's life cycle has run its course, if that's something that's going to happen, no way.
No.
Like, they'll just do another hardware iteration. Like Matt said, I don't see it happening for at least another 10 years. Want to read the next one?
Let's see. We want to do we just did the last console one, right?
We kind of did. I mean, we answered the top one from Ravang first.
Right, but Tibble and Bits asks, what are your thoughts on Microsoft saying they want this to be the last console generation? Is it too soon? And
I don't think there's ever a time limit on stuff like that. Like,
no, well, I mean, I think it's going to change how people upgrade, and people might start skipping every other upgrade.
Which is fine.
As long as the compatibility remains the same, I mean, that changes the game.
I mean, look, there's going to be people who did not buy an Xbox One who are going to buy a Scorpio. Mm-hmm. There might be a couple people who have not bought a PlayStation 4 that are going to buy a Neo. Some people maybe who are going to get PlayStation VR a month or two after it launches. Like, why would you ever buy PlayStation VR and not buy the Neo? Mm-hmm. It just doesn't make any sense. So,
if you don't already have a PlayStation, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and what we mentioned before is Microsoft has a built-in incentive to message this stuff, by the way. Because of Play Anywhere, which is what was the prior question was related to.
The fact that they own a totally different platform that is never going away, whether they like it or not.
Yeah. I mean, Microsoft wants this to be the case. So, of course, it's going to message out, like, this is the way everything's going. Hey, look at us. We're doing it already. You may not think that the stuff that people say in interviews, like these executives, is all planned. It's all planned. Like, it's all a part of a message that they want to create. They sit down in meetings before they do interviews. They're like, what are the touch points that we want to hit on?
Much more so than, like, developer interviews and stuff.
Yeah.
Like you get coaching for the developers to, like, not look like idiots in front of a camera.
Yeah.
But if you're in an executive position at these major publishers, like, they have an objective for sitting down.
Before they go in there, they're reading something. They're saying, you need to talk about this, 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 and this, because this relates to something we're doing a year from now. This relates to our overall broader strategy. It's all according to plan, without a doubt. So, Microsoft has a reason to spread stuff like this out there. But at the same time, I agree with them. This is going to be I think this is going to be... Like, as far as numbered consoles, like PlayStation 4, Xbox One, like, I don't think we'll ever see that again. Like, I don't think we're going to see PlayStation 5. Well, maybe we will.
I think we'll see PlayStation 5.
Because it can be used as, like, a marketing tool as
there's still the iPhone 7 coming, you know.
Because you have the S and all that, and the S Plus and all that stuff, but it's still, they end up doing the next number, and you're probably right. There'll be a PlayStation 5, probably.
Will they ever get to the promised PlayStation 9 from that PS2 commercial?
Right.
I don't know.
It's funny, too, that nobody could have had the foresight back then to realize how things were going.
Yeah. Well, apparently we're going to inhale the PlayStation 9. So.
Well, Packer started talking about this stuff like a year and a half, 2 years ago, and people thought he was crazy, by the way. Crazy. If you go back and read some of the comments on his initial statement about console generations going away, and it's hilarious, because he was right, they were wrong, but nobody goes back and apologizes after the fact. So, here's one from Arj. After No Man's Sky's Reddit post outlining all the things that are missing, do you think customers have been lied to? You kind of talked about this last week, but things have kind of changed over the last week because people actually went back and collected everything Sean Murray ever said about the game. And there is a lot of stuff that was promised.
A lot of differences. No, we were not lied to.
Yeah,
because that's not what a lie is.
And
a lie is a intentional deception. And when
Exactly.
developers mention things that don't end up in the final product, when they say that, they think it's going to be. Sometimes
some developers do lie, though.
Well, some developers...
There have been some developers that knew stuff wasn't going to be in their games. I don't think that's the case here. But
I don't think it's the case here. I don't think it's the case 99.9% of the time. I don't even think Molyneux did that very often. I think the Molyneux thing, and I will never get a straight answer out of him on it.
Maybe someday.
But I guarantee that most of that is he looked at a design doc early on, and that's what he thought the game was, and he wasn't really involved in but he was the face. He was the person they put up there, and he would say, oh, this, and that was all probably true when they pitched it to him.
Yeah.
But now, halfway through development, they're like, oh, this had to change, this had to be this. So generally, no, they're not, because it's why would you lie about that stuff? Because everyone's gonna find out. It makes no sense to do that.
This is one of the things I really hate about internet culture. Is everybody always assumes the worst. It's like when we got robbed. And everyone's like, oh, it's an inside job. Shane, robbed himself to, fleece people out of money. They, instead of just saying, oh, my God, that sucks, he got robbed and lost, everything, they immediately jump to someone's trying to be a jerk. And that's what's happened here. Instead of people being like, well, he had plans for the game, it eventually had to come out, and just like any other video game, features ultimately got cut. Instead of just being like, well, he had a vision, he didn't quite reach it, it's like, he lied to us. Oh, you poor little baby, you got lied to.
All marketing is lying to some degree.
I hate that about the internet, man. And it's obviously not everyone.
The original Men in Black trailer had 5 scenes in it that were not in the final movie. Was that a lie?
Yeah.
No, it was marketing. Marketing can be, but also Murray, I don't think is doing that. It's it's not a lie. It's not a deception. It's just maybe his eyes were too big for his stomach on some of that.
Or it was probably a part of the design doc initially.
Yeah,
and they just weren't able to get it all
most
done.
of the time when developers say things like that don't end up in the final game, when they say it, they are sure it's going to be in the final game. But at some point, things you're sure about in development turn out to be things that don't work properly.
And I give a special exception for this game as well, because this is a really ambitious game that you have literally like 10 or 15 people working on. Like, how hard is it to gauge how much you can and can't get done? Like, it's
probably very difficult. Who knows? And they're still running into problems with things that work or don't work, or why don't they work? Right now, I have a system I need to jump into that's got an Atlas interface into it, and every time I try to warp in, it crashes. Yeah. But why is that happening? I don't know. It didn't get fixed in the latest patch, and but do I think I got lied to? No. That was not what happened. And also, it's like, where was there's this whole thing about the conspiracy. It's like the game got 6s and 7s for the most part. I mean, the media. Here's the thing: where's the big media payout bribe collusion on this one? Because the previews were crazy positive, and everyone's like, it's all right. It isn't quite up to what we were hoping it was going to be. It's like, if that was happening, where was it? Where were the money hats on this one?
Where's all the payola people?
And the other thing is, one of the things that I was disappointed wasn't in the game. No one seems to be talking about, which is the fact that in his demos of the game, even as recently as the big press tour they did in April with IGN and all this, he's talking about scanning and getting all the discoveries and stuff, and he's like, you have to get to the Atlas beacon to upload the discoveries, or if you die, you lose all your discoveries, and that is not how it works.
Right.
You just upload them from that menu, and the beacons are basically nothing. They basically tell you another place to go, and they don't have anything to do with anything.
They're basically like extra slots for your
right, and I like the idea of that tension of like, okay, I've scanned everything on this planet, but I got to find one of those beacons to safeguard that information and get there, and that's gone. And I'm like, that was one of the elements that I thought sounded really cool, and it doesn't ruin the game that it's not there for me. But it's weird to me.
More user friendly,
right? But it's weird to me that like I haven't seen that complained about anywhere, and like I'm like that really was something that was very recently brought up, and I care about that a lot more than whether the fucking planets rotate.
Well, I think some people probably prefer to just be able to upload stuff without having to go to a beacon.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but I wish there was like an option. I don't know. That game has a long way to go still, and
it could be like Destiny, where a year from now it's an entirely different game.
Could be like Destiny or a Minecraft.
Yeah.
I realize Minecraft was stated definitively to be early access or beta or alpha and only cost $19, but at the same time, if you just waited and looked at the reviews, I think the reviews on No Man's Sky would have steered you pretty right.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a lot of reviews that felt like they were unnecessarily forgiving the game for its shortcomings.
Not at all. All right, let's get to the next one. Grim. With Sony and Microsoft releasing the Neo and Scorpio presumably in March near the NX, is it a planned date to steal some thunder and sales from the market share before the NX release?
I don't think the Scorpio is coming out then.
I don't either. I think Scorpio's coming out
next fall,
probably next year.
Neo, maybe?
As to the question of Neo.
Yeah, we don't know about the Neo. Like, it could be anywhere, frankly. But
announced in like a couple weeks.
Announced a couple weeks, release in October, that could happen.
Yeah, it could. Although if you listen to Pactor, he doesn't think that's possible. But
no.
It could happen.
I mean,
I would say March is probably the most likely release.
March. I mean, I'm sure it's a nice bonus to stick it to Nintendo there a little bit, but I'm sure most of that would be we want to release it this financial year.
Yeah, that's probably all it would be because most financial quarters end at the end of March, and so Sony would want to get at least a couple weeks of sales in there to keep its stockholders happy before the quarter closes. Do you think there's any other nefarious kind of undercurrents going on there? Do you think that maybe that's the double whammy? They're like, we need to get it in under the quarter, but also, we do need to stave off maybe this Nintendo thing a little bit?
I feel like Sony does not care one bit what Nintendo does. I
agree 1,000%. It does not care. It is so dominant right now. It does not care what Nintendo does at all. It doesn't care what anybody does right now. It's playing its own game, and it's winning it. And it would be dumb, actually, I feel like, for Sony to even base any of its strategies around what anyone else is doing. It knows its release schedule as far as games and things like that and what are coming out. It knows what products are going to take the best advantage of Neo. And that'll be what's going to be most interesting to me when they unveil Neo is what are they going to show with it? Mm-hmm. Are they just going to show Uncharted 4, but 4K? Or is
and how do you show that effectively through the internet?
Right. It's like the cameras we're shooting on right now are 4K cameras, but so what?
Yeah, but the video is 720p because that's what...
I would never shoot anything in 4K. One, every minute of 4K video is a gig. Literally, on my 64 gig card in that camera right now, I could record probably 10 minutes of footage before that card's full. It's just not practical.
And you don't want to see us in 4K.
Yeah.
Really.
I mean, I would say, though, that, they put out 4K footage of a Forza Horizon 3, and while I was watching it in 1080p, I could still see the difference in the 4K footage.
That is a definite thing. It's on No Man's Sky, I'm actually running it at 3K and downsampling it to 1440p.
Right.
Because you can definitely tell the difference. If you can run it at a high resolution and then downsample, do it. It matters.
But there could be a game that Sony has had in development that is fully prepared to take advantage of Neo. And maybe, what it's determining when Neo comes out based upon when that game is going to be finished. So I don't think Sony's looking at anything that any other publisher or developer is doing right now. It's running its own race and it's winning it. So the next one?
Substance 104 asks, what is your hype level for Sony's Neo conference, and do you think Nintendo will show the NX in September? What did you make of Microsoft's lack of confidence in the Windows 10 store with Quantum Break?
3 questions there from Substance. Hype level for Sony's Neo conference. I'm really not that excited for it.
I'm probably gonna get one, but I don't. It's here's the new thing. It's slightly more powerful. It's shiny. Like, it's not like a system reveal. It's not like the NX reveal.
Right. It's not like the first time you show a console and it's like, here's the library of all these games, or even like what we got with like PlayStation VR. Like, it's not. I don't think it's going to be up to that level. I think they're going to show it. They're going to maybe show, like I said, one game that they built specifically with it in mind to show what it can do, and then show the back catalog to see how it improves it. But I don't expect it to be like this huge, like 2-hour blowout. I think it'll probably last like 30 minutes or something like that. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. I could be wrong. I mean, they could turn it into an hour or something like that. But I would.
But I think
really
like, here's
shocked.
the thing. Here's the specs. Here's what it does. Here's a game. Here's the multimedia features that work with our 4K TVs. Please buy a Sony TV. Please buy a Sony TV. Please buy a Sony TV. Here's a price. Here's a release date. See ya.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a 30-minute.
And they may even do like here's our new line of 4K televisions
to go with it.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not that excited for it. Do you think Nintendo will show off the NX in September?
They better, or that thing's not coming out in March.
Exactly. I think it will. Because it is, one, it's sticking to its March release date. It hasn't fudged on that at all.
And the rumors are kind of leaking at the right pace to think that September is when we're getting this.
They were starting to get leaks from parts manufacturers and assemblers in China and other countries talking about how their business has suddenly ramped up. Companies that are rumored to be working with Nintendo on its new hardware. All signs are pointing to, yes, it should be unveiled next month, and it's still coming out in March. And then, what did you make of Microsoft's lack of confidence in the Windows 10 store with Quantum Break?
Duh.
I don't think it really has that much to do with its lack of confidence in the Windows 10 store.
Yeah, it's just you'll sell more copies of that game if you open the floodgate there.
What really happened, I think, is that Quantum Break has basically tanked and is not sold up to the investment Microsoft has put in it, and it's just like, look.
You're going to get this thing in front of more eyes during the Steam sales for the rest of the year than like keeping it on the Windows 10 store.
Yeah, and I think that's really the big story.
And I think the other thing is like because of that Windows 10 store not being tremendously enthusiastically adopted, there's probably a lot of PC gamers who have forgotten that game even exists. Yep. So if you can throw that thing in front of their eyeballs a couple of times on a service they actually use, probably good for it.
Yeah, I think Microsoft counted on selling a lot more copies for Xbox One than it did, meaning that the sales on Windows Store would just be gravy on top of the money it made on Xbox One. And since it didn't completely tank on Xbox One, but it didn't sell anywhere near as much as what I thought it was going to before I played it anyway. And I think now Microsoft is just like in scramble mode, trying to do whatever it can to get as many sales out of the investments they put in it as possible. So that's that one. From Dimp Digital, do you prefer the mystery of procedural generation or handcrafted level world design that has been built from the ground up by hand?
Well, here's the thing. Nobody builds them by hand. Like Skyrim's map is 97% or so procedurally generated.
Yeah.
Like you generate the thing, you say this is a forest, this is a thing, and then you go in and you hand mold and handcraft the cities and the things where quests happen. And I mean,
but there's a difference though. Those games like Skyrim, they're not procedurally generating them on the piece of hardware that's sitting underneath your television.
Right.
That's procedurally generated by the developer and then just put onto the disk.
Right.
So, yeah, like they randomize the world. Like if you have a bunch of wilderness, they're not going to handcraft
nobody's planting
every
each
little
tree.
rolling hill. And
no one's telling a story with the rocks in the Skyrim forest. Or the dust in the Mad Max world.
Right. But I think he's talking about here is the game that literally does it with your GPU and CPU that's sitting underneath your television.
I don't know. I mean, here's the thing about like No Man's Sky is while I think the animal pieces and the stones and the plants, like I've seen most of what. Although I'm still a couple. I found butterflies.
Every once in a while,
found butterflies, and I was like, and I saw earlier this morning. I ran into a planet where there was a serial killer dinosaur creature that ran around. I'd seen once another creature kill another creature.
I've seen
and
them
this
like
guy,
snipe at each other a little bit.
This guy ran around murdering everything he found, and I'm like, what? It was like, and his temperament was called unpredictable.
Wow.
And he ran around killing everything. It's the most I've seen. But here's the thing. The place I think that's kind of repetitive. I feel like I've sort of seen most of what it has to offer in that regard. The one place I don't think that it lets down in that sense the topography and geology of those planets is always interesting.
Yeah.
There's canyons and weird rocks and weird formations and the way things flow and like the plains versus there's mountain. It's all one biome, but they do they create an interesting geology and geography to play in. There's not a lot to do in that, which is kind of part of the game's problem. But like in terms of the procedural generation, like whatever they're doing there, I feel like they need to have more game in there, more things to do, but that's separate from the procedural generation situation. Yeah. The procedural generation, whatever, needs more pieces to play with, but what they're doing is like on some level in terms of like just, because sometimes in like something like Skyrim or Fallout, I just enjoy going over that hill and seeing what's over the hill, and I think it's just as satisfying in No Man's Sky to be doing that, even though what's over the hill in No Man's Sky is generally not as interesting as what is actually over the hill in Fallout.
Right. What's over the hill in No Man's Sky looks exactly almost
another hill.
Exactly like what you just walked over.
But sometimes it's a beautiful moon
every
ride.
Once in a while.
Every once in a while.
I think part of it is that why that game actually has an impact in those moments is because you've done it a bunch of times and there wasn't that impact. So you're almost like, thank God, like I finally came over like a horizon and saw something different.
Well, that's exploration.
Yeah.
That's for you. I mean, most of the time it's nothing, but that means when it is something, that makes it more special.
But specifically for No Man's Sky, I would say personally, I would have preferred to have 300 planets that were hand-built than billions and billions of planets that were constructed randomly with an algorithm.
I think there's going to be another game for you then.
I hope that would be great.
Well, in theory, Elite Dangerous is going to have something similar. I mean, they've got I think more
Elite
than 300.
Dangerous is too sterile for me. Like, it doesn't have enough character. Like a lot of those spacefaring, like
my problem with Elite
sims,
Dangerous is that
I don't
so
rigid and just.
Well, my problem with the Elite Dangerous is that I don't want to babysit a throttle for all.
And there's too much sim stuff involved.
Right,
yeah.
but there's another one that's been I think Empyrean or something like that. It's an early access indie game that has been. It's basically it's been described as No Man's Sky with a game in it. And it's kind of the same idea. I don't know how far along it is. I haven't played it. I've seen it pop up as a recommendation if you think No Man's Sky is too empty of content. Yeah. And that you can build like a mothership and a base in the orbit and use that and stuff. But otherwise it's kind of the same idea. Yeah. So that, I mean, I think the success of No Man's Sky, and it has been successful, no question. I mean, sales-wise. And
it's the biggest launch on Steam, or the second biggest launch on Steam of the year, right?
In terms of consecutive, concurrent players, so I think you will see more of this, and I think you will see someone attempt what you're talking about. We're not going to make an infinite universe that no one can ever see all of, but Let's say someone made a game where they procedurally generated, 1,000 planets and handcrafted stuff to happen on each one of them. Yeah. Are you going to see all those 1,000 planets? No. Probably not.
Probably not.
I don't think so. That's a lot of planets.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with No Man's Sky is just overkill. Like, you don't need that many planets.
It is overkill, but it's like on one hand, I'm kind of glad it's there in that regard.
I'm glad somebody tried to do it, if anything, to kind of prove whether it could work or not.
Penny Arcade had a pretty good observation in their No Man's Sky comic, where it's like you are my creature, no other conscious being will ever lay eyes on you, and I do not give a shit. Yeah. Sometimes I do give a shit. Yeah. But most of the time, yes, it's just I try to name this is my exercise to remind myself of what I'm doing and how hard it's becoming to sort of see the differences between things in this game. After all this time, is I'm trying to name. I don't name the rocks and the plants, but I try to name every animal something unique, and it's getting hard, man. You can only name the four-legged things with the two extra limbs on the bottom of the foot. The twinkle-toed cow beast are in variation so many times.
Speaking of which, your Swagosaurus Rex has turned into like a pop culture phenomenon.
Blowing up.
I can't believe no one's like reached out to you for like an interview or something at this point. Like, it's just crazy. It's
Call me Klepek.
How one little YouTube video has just become so huge. It's awesome.
Well, it's funny because it's being used by both haters and lovers.
Oh yeah.
Because like the haters are like,
Look how goofy
look
this
how
looks.
ridiculous this is, and the lovers are like, this thing's
Look how
hilarious.
awesome, yeah.
I mean, I put it up because I think it's legitimately funny. I think it's. I mean,
it is funny.
it is. And you know, that was that one video where the guy played, you know, the Jurassic Park theme on the E3 trailer, and the terrible harmonica cover of the theme with the Swagosaurus.
Yeah.
I think that's hilarious
It is,
because
yeah.
it is absolutely a true observation of the game.
Yeah.
And do I think that makes the game shit? No, a lot of people do, but I think those people are just being overly judgmental. But yeah, I have not seen anything resembling that trailer in this game. I haven't seen a single sauropod anything of any, let alone anything that big. But that body type doesn't seem to be in the game.
Well,
and I've never seen a rhino come charging through the brush, knocking trees to its side. I mean, there's a
I've
lot
never
of stuff in
seen
that trailer that's
many
not
different
there.
creatures on the same shot before.
I've seen
2.
No, I've seen 5
really?
in one area.
Wow.
I've gotten some pretty good
lucky.
herd.
You've played it a ton, though.
But at the same time, like, they don't do anything coherent. You know, like in that trailer, like, the little things are drinking at the river, which is, you know, rivers are not really in the game. I've seen rivers, but they're, like, clearly accidentally, like, the procedural generation stuck a ribbon of water there. Or, that's one of the big, I mean, I know they're fixing technical stuff, but that game needs flowing water so badly for waterfalls and just a more dynamic way of creating sort of how
I don't see that ever happening.
Hey, if Minecraft can do it.
Yeah. We should move on, though. Let's see. Last question from Elric. Worst console controller of all time?
The Atari 5200.
And I say the Atari 2600.
Hang on. I lost my microphone.
Because the Atari 2600 had 2 jobs. Have an analog stick and 1 button. And it couldn't even do that. Like,
did you ever play the Atari 5200?
I have, yeah.
Because that thing,
no, it's bad.
I mean,
Atari 2600.
Whatever. The answer is Atari something.
Yeah.
Like one way or the other. I'd say either the 5200 or the Jaguar were the worst controllers I ever used.
The only reason I'm really banging on the 2600 is because the analog sticks were just made out of complete crap. Like, it was a hollow tube of plastic with a rubber sleeve over top of it. And so,
the joystick. Yeah.
And so it just snaps off. And, like, ultimately, like, my dad bought me, like, 3 of them. Eventually, he just started buying bolts that he would just screw into the base, and I would play it with a bolt.
We never broke one, but the rubber thing came off all the time. You ended up just with that white plastic thing.
I broke so many of those, and, you know, it was because it was so simple. You had a button and a stick, and they still couldn't get that right. That's my pick.
Now, I definitely go with the 5200 because nothing worked right, and it had that giant like keypad thing, and that was you had to put a different inner overlay on each one.
Just like in television.
And just like
television was pretty bad.
That was pretty bad too, and a lot of those early ones.
Because if you controlled in television games with a gold disc.
Yeah.
Literally had no direction. It was like multi-directional. So you just were like, I don't even. It was so insane.
Super strange, and then. The Jaguar was like the resurrection of the 5200 controller with the weird, the phone number dialing pad on it and all, and it was just the flimsiest thing you could. Atari's controllers blow. Like that's just there's no way around. All the Atari controllers are bad.
Yep.
And but if you're talking like total mainstream stuff, I hate the DualShock. Like until the DualShock 4,
I hated it too.
I didn't like any of the DualShock except I like the dual analog, which everyone forgets before the shock. The dual analog was Sony's controller with no rumble in it between the normal digital controller and the DualShock.
I don't remember that.
Came out for Gran Turismo. I bought
but it. Didn't still have the same stick placement and stick height?
Had the same stick placement and stick height, but the sticks were concave.
No.
And the handles were longer. It was a much more comfortable controller, and you had to press the thing to like switch from analog to digital. It couldn't do the same thing. But I got it for Colony Wars, to play Colony Wars. And it was great, and then they stopped making it like that and put out the DualShock when they added rumble, and that's when the sticks stopped being concave and they became the mushroom sticks. And I always found those very uncomfortable.
It makes no sense whatsoever to have a rounded analog stick.
But they fixed that with the PlayStation 4. So.
PlayStation 4 controller I love.
Very good.
I like Xbox One too. All the controllers out right now are great. I am even totally cool with the Wii U gamepad.
I didn't like the one my launch Xbox One controller tried to kill me, so I don't like that one very much. But the one I replaced it with is much better.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. One big announcement before we go. Tomorrow morning, or today, depending on when you're watching this, the show probably will go up a little earlier than GameFace usually does, because we're actually recording it earlier in the day. But tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, Achievements go live. So they are done, perfected. They've actually been done for a couple days. We just wanted to work out a couple last kinks and just make sure everything works smoothly and test it thoroughly. Everything is good to go. So achievements live on Sifted Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. So, and at that point, Sifted will be feature complete. Crews and achievements were the last things to be added, and crews have been up for a while. So feels really good to finally hit this milestone. Finally, the spec doc that I handed Brent on the very first day we met, everything on that doc has now been completed. So kudos to Brent and congratulations to Brent. He's worked really hard on the site and done an amazing job. Congratulate him in the comments. I know it'll mean a lot to him. He may not think, but it really will. So make sure you mention what a great job he did and thank him for all his hard work. And that's it. Everybody have an excellent weekend. GameFace Freestyle is up and out.